Hey everyone, this is Bill Krieger from the Veterans Archives podcast, where we preserve and share the incredible stories of our nation's heroes. Catch us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wreaths Across America Radio, or stream anytime on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Really, anywhere you choose to get your podcast, you should be able to find us. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on social media to help us reach more veterans and supporters. We are a nonprofit, and this service is completely free for veterans. Every story matters, and every voice deserves to be heard. Spread the word, honor our heroes, and join us on this mission. Follow, share, and tune in, because their story should never be forgotten. Learn more at veteransarchives.org. We'll see you there. Today is Monday, February 9th, 2026. We're talking with Andrew Glenn, who served in the United States Army. So good morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
We're going to start out fairly simple. When and where were you born?
St. Paul, Minnesota, March 6th, 1948.
Okay. And always lived in Minnesota then?
Yes.
All right. Well, tell me.
Well, I've lived other places.
Oh, okay. All right. So for your childhood and growing up, did you stay in Minnesota?
Yeah, I grew up in Minnesota until I was 18, and I grew up summers in Georgetown, Colorado.
Oh.
So kind of a split residency.
And what took you to Colorado?
Well, my father decided that this winter was too gloomy here, so he packed the family into our 58 Mercury and drove out. And we all wanted to do this anyway, to go skiing. He was an enthusiast, and he kind of represented Hart skis. So I had my first ski lesson in Arapahoe Basin, Colorado, when I was 8 years old.
Wow. So skiing's been a part of your life then?
Pardon?
I said skiing was a fairly significant part of your life then. It sounds like.
Well, yeah, it was. My father was a kind of a gung-ho outdoorsman, so he said, "Well, we're going,"
Yeah. So let me back up a little bit though. So you have did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I had an older brother, and I have a younger sister.
Okay.
And I had a younger brother who died from polio.
Oh, all right. And how old was he?
He died at 1 year old, and my brother and I, all three of us, got polio in 1952. And we all went into Anchor Hospital, and my little brother died there, and my older brother got meningitis, and I had a light case of polio, and I had crutches for about a year.
Oh my gosh! All right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, how did that impact you as a child then?
You've really hit my first experience of being out of my body was being 4 years old and watching dead children being wheeled out of the children's ward with sheets over their faces. And it was bad, but I just remember a feeling of complete vulnerability. And I became somewhat autistic, and my parents came, and the doctor said, "Well, we better, Henrietta, you better watch this kid. He's checking out."
Yeah.
So that really helped,
Yeah. So that's quite an impact at quite a young age.
Yeah. And then I had to wear these little, they were like foot-long leg braces. And I had to walk to school in the morning. And it was winter in St. Paul's, 20 below zero. And my mother would say, "You're no cripple, get out the door and go to school."
Wow.
Tough lady.
Yeah. It sounds like it. So what did your dad do for a living?
My dad was a very interesting man. He was appointed to the Supreme Court when he was 43 to the the outer, what you call it, the outer, there's 16 outer rim court. He wasn't in the central court, but when he did that, he was also appointed as a probate judge for Ramsey County.
Okay. All right. And that allowed him then to, in the winters, go out to Colorado and ski?
Yes, you got it. It was kind of privileged existence. I think he had a pretty heavy caseload up till December 15th, and that's when he took us out to Colorado. Actually, this is a very interesting story because in the summer of 1956, if I can diverge a little here.
Absolutely.
He was a hunter. He hunted mountain goats and all kinds of critters, which I didn't like hunting. But anyway, that's another story. So he came back from Colorado and he walked into the front porch out in the country. We had a fishery, and he'd walk in the front door and he says, "Henrietta, I just bought a house in Colorado." I could remember that. And my mother turned around and said, "What?" So they were great adventurers, both of them. So we packed up that summer, 1956, and took my baby sister with us, who was, like six months old.
Mm-hmm.
And we discovered this house, which was built in 1861, and it was completely dilapidated. Just windows with newspapers in them. And we went in this house, and it was filled with antiques from, 1790. And the woman's name was Pulsiver, and she had been a music teacher in this mountain town. And outside, there was a plaque on the house next door that said, both these houses were built by Erskine McClellan in 1860 to 1861. And my father looked at my mother and said, "Is that my missing uncle?"
What?
Well, the Historical Society researched it and found out that, well, as my father told me, and his grandmother in 1925, when he was 12 years old, said that her brother Erskine McClellan had been an artillery officer in the Confederacy, and his brother Job went west to discover gold in the hills of Colorado in 1863, and nobody ever heard from him again. And so this is my story of synchronicity.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that terrific? So our jaws just fell open.
Yeah, I don't even know if the word coincidence fits the bill here. That's crazy.
It's really crazy.
Yeah.
And so that's what got me into finding out all about the McClellans. So I looked up Erskine McClellan, and he had built the Georgetown Opera House, and he burned it down in a fit of rage over a woman. And he didn't have any insurance, and he got caught, or he had insurance, he got caught. But he died in a bathtub with a prostitute when he was 88 years old. But he had built, and they named McClellan Mountain after Erskine McClellan. McClellan Mountain is a big mountain in Colorado. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so to make a long story short, I researched this, and in his obituary, it said Erskine McClellan gave $5,000 to the son of his cousin, General George McClellan, the commander of the Potomac. And I thought, wow, this is cool stuff.
That's quite a history, and interesting that you found out about it the way that you did. I know. The story was interesting enough when your dad just came home and said, "Hey, I bought a house," but then it turns out to be much more than that.
It's extraordinary. And I've always been kind of a history buff. I'm a writer, and I live pretty much in the present as an entertainer. And it started me on the track of history, and it began to occur to me that we really, as Emerson said, out of our eyes peer our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really kind of makes your hair stand up when you think about it.
Oh, yeah, it definitely does. Now, I do want to go back a little bit, too. So you're 8 years old, and your sister's just a baby at this point. And you go out to Colorado, and you're kind of coerced into taking ski lessons. I'm just curious, how did your bout with polio impact your ability to ski? And were you not wearing the braces anymore at this point?
Yeah, I was fine, except that I had atrophy of the certain muscles in the transversalis muscles in my gut, and I couldn't do sit-ups till I was about 30 years old. I was crippled when I played football, so I was okay.
Okay, I see. And so you're splitting your time really between Minnesota and Colorado growing up. Can you tell me a little bit about what school was like for you? Now, you were saying that when you were young and wearing braces, your mom kind of said, "Hey, get out the door. You're not crippled. You can go to school." But what was school like for you as a child?
Oh, I loved it. It was sanity, order, very orderly.
Uh-huh.
So my parents were concerned that I was overly neat. I probably got this from General McClellan, who all his uniforms were neat, but he wouldn't go into battle.
Right.
So all my little shoes were lined up and my crayons. I wanted to be a wildlife artist, and I sketched a lot, and everything was so neat in my room. They took me to a psychiatrist. And, I was 6 or something. And psychiatrist said, are you people crazy? You're lucky to have a kid like this.
Right. Who takes their kid to the psychiatrist because he's too neat? That's quite interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe helicopter parents. I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty early on for that, isn't it?
What was I going to say about Colorado? The mountains were an extraordinary experience, and in 1960, and this changed my life. During those summers, I befriended a Cuban family of Raul Godoy, and I befriended Stevie, who became my friend. He was my age. Was a champion kid skier. And I lived in that house. That's where I learned some Spanish. I was in and out of that house, and they had a Cubano maid who was a Negrito black woman, and it was the first black woman I ever met. And she used to hug me in her big, huge breasts.
Mm-hmm.
She used to pick me off the floor. And when we went back that winter, on January 2nd, we were in Fairmont here in St. Paul. A man knocked on the door. In those days, the door was open. And there was this little man that looked like Pablo Neruda with a black hat. And it was the Presidente del Banco Cuba. He was the president of the Bank of Cuba. And Castro had put a hit out on him, which I learned later.
Mm-hmm.
And my father had given him sanctuary in St. Paul and spoke for him. And I'm thinking of all the stuff that's going on in Minneapolis right now.
Yeah.
But anyway, it resonates. But Stevie, later in my life, I was a drummer, and he got me auditions with bands, with Santana and Zephyr down in Colorado Springs. And we went to Carlos Santana's house, and I was a good conga drummer, and I was about 23. And the back door opened and this big cloud of marijuana smoke came out. And there was Carlos's wife, and she said, "Carlos, no aquí, no aquí. Ahora no aquí." So that was the end of my audition for Santana.
Oh.
But yeah, he had split. So
That's no good. That's no good.
But my Latin drumming started with Stevie, who was a guitarist, and anyway.
So how old were you when you started playing the drums then?
I was about 13. I started in tablas, Indian tablas.
Mm-hmm. And then you just kind of moved drums. So do you feel like that was kind of the musical influence that started for you, or were you interested in music prior to that?
Well, I just couldn't keep my hands still. I'd beat out rhythms on the headboard of my bed. My father would say, "Would you stop that? It's 2:00 in the morning." So they just, gave me a pair of bongos.
It saves wear and tear on the headboard, doesn't it?
Yeah. But then what was happening was, this is a really cool segue. Dave Lee, he was a border guard. This again ties in with this whole thing in Minneapolis. Anyway, I was 12 years old, and I was in the kitchen with his wife Muriel, who was my babysitter. And Dave Lee owned the Scholar Coffeehouse, and he said this kid named Bobby Zimmerman keeps pestering me to play his guitar, and he looks like a drowned rat. True story.
Oh my gosh. Did he ever let him in to play?
Yeah. I bet he remembers him too.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. So this whole time you're in school now. Were you in public school or private schools there in Minneapolis? Or?
My parents asked me if I wanted to go public school. I said no. They sent me to SPA, which was English country day school.
Uh-huh.
Very upper class. And I studied Latin at 12 years old. And I'm very thankful for this education, because I had to learn Latin and German, and I hated it, of course. But I got good grades until I turned a sophomore. Mm-hmm. And then I kept flunking math, so I had to leave.
Oh. So did you end up going? So first of all, math wasn't your forte, I take it.
Yeah. No, it was hell.
Yeah. Yep. So then did you end up going to public school from that point?
Yeah. One of the things that drove me out of SPA is that we wore uniforms, and we marched every day, or maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays, company marches around the school. But I liked that because of the drum tattoos. Mm-hmm. And I got in trouble for like bopping when I was marching and stuff. So I was kind of a problem for the school, I think.
Yeah, well, I find it interesting, Andrew, that here you are, this neat, tidy kid, so neat and tidy that your parents are concerned about your mental health, and you go to this school, and I'll bet the neat and tidy worked out really well, but the inability to just kind of be still just didn't work out.
No, it didn't. And God, I was singing American art song at 15 years old. I was singing it well. Mm-hmm. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I took the one least traveled by. Stuff like that. Yeah. Which I picked up again when I was 30, and I sang German lieder professionally. So SPA gave me a lot, mm-hmm. but I just couldn't. I started a gang. We would run around and we would flick ink on the back of uniforms. And that's what I think essentially got me kicked out. It was devious.
Wow. Yeah, that is pretty devious.
And then Mason Benepe would flush M80s down the toilet. Oh, that really. So I was a kind of a ringleader of pranksters, and well, there you go.
Yeah. This is interesting. I never would have guessed, but that's the best part about interviewing is learning about these things with folks. So, what was the transition like for you then from SPA to public school?
Astonishing. I regret leaving SPA. The first day at Central, people were sleeping during class with their heads in their arms, and then they had whiskey bottles sticking out. One kid had a whiskey bottle sticking out of his back pocket. I was shocked.
Yeah, that's pretty shocking. Even I would say even by today's standards.
Yeah, and at SPA is when I first began to write poetry. I discovered that I could write poetry really well, and then I was getting serious about literature, and half the class was sleeping. And we had a great English teacher, and we studied the existentialists, and that was just fascinating.
So, how many kids in that class in particular were like you that were actually interested in what was being taught?
I would say about 10 out of 30. We had kind of an intellectual clique of existentialists, and I was into the French stuff, but German idealism and Hegel and Kant and all that would come later. And but there were a lot of black kids, a lot of disadvantaged kids, as they're called. And the teacher said, Mr. Estlin, he said, I'm giving you all A's so you can relax.
Apparently they relaxed.
They really relaxed.
No kidding. Now, so this would have been, if you were 16 or 17, this would have been in like the mid-60s then?
1963.
Okay, so things were just sort of taking off in the United States too, right? Like questioning and protesting and things like that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that added to your interest in like existentialism and kind of reading what you like to read?
Oh, no. I remember being oblivious. Kennedy's death the year before, we just kind of all took it in stride. It was, I didn't integrate social movements and forces around me with intellectual ideas. I was really more of a scholar type. I was really interested in the great poets. I mean, the Norton Anthology was my Bible, and I could, if you asked me about the poet Emerson, you asked me about John Crow Ransom, the poet, I would tell you what the structure of his poems was. I had everything figured out, at least I thought. And I was such a snob, I wouldn't read Walt Whitman.
Oh, so you were a true intellectual then.
I was a true poetic intellectual who would not tolerate even T.S. Eliot because he was Catholic. I was such a fanatic. So I think my narrow-mindedness, my opinions helped me to write, to really define my own writing. And I still have this problem that it's hard for me to appreciate other poets who are really good. And this kind of intellectual bigotry really landed me in the school of the Lake poets. The great poets to me have always been not Tennyson, but Coleridge and the great lyric poets of the English tradition, the pastoral tradition. Mm-hmm. And that kind of sticks. That's kind of like saying, I'll listen to Beethoven, but the rest is crap, So, and that's not true of me. I listen to all music.
Right. So what's it like to be that age and to have that sort of intellect? Did it make it easier or harder to make friends and have relationships? And especially at that, you're in high school and you're kind of at that age.
Well, there were friends. We shared the same opinions and thoughts about poetry, and I had poetry friends, a few, not many. I felt very isolated, but it wasn't painful.
Okay.
I wasn't one of these manic depressive, or maybe I am, I don't know, but I wasn't one of these long suffering, highly gifted types, that have what now they have labels for them now, extremely gifted and aspergic and all that kind of thing. No, I felt normal.
Yeah. Well, and talk to me a little bit about, high school outside of the academic part of it. What sorts of things did you do? What sorts of things did you enjoy?
I was a total athlete. I was a jock intellectual. So I track and field. I got a state record in the 175-yard dash when I was 14. And they thought I was going to be some track star, but I never got bigger than 5'7". But even that, there's short sprinters who went to the Olympics, so I just never got faster. Well, so then the shot put. I put the shot put till it nearly killed me.
So I got to hear that story. How did it almost kill you?
Well, I broke my wrist.
Oh.
And I didn't find out 10 years later.
Oh.
But yeah, I got to the state, but I was too short, and I was in flight 44. That shows you how far I could throw the shot. So I was kind of butting my head. I wouldn't face reality that you have to be tall to be a great shot putter.
Mm-hmm.
And I threw, yeah.
Well, so it kind of begs the question, hearing about your early childhood and then you're an athlete and a runner. Was there any residual effects from polio and all of that as you got older, or did it just sort of disappear?
No, it disappeared.
Okay, so
I think it was a full recovery.
Yeah, so it didn't hold you back then at all?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Were there other sports that you liked?
This abdominal weakness was something that I should have addressed. I should have gone to a chiropractor because I had scoliosis and lordosis. I had twisted spine, mm-hmm. and it screwed up the firing mechanism in the abduction, adduction of the. I'm a massage therapist, so I can talk like this.
Okay.
It screwed up the ability. Screwed up my core muscles, mm-hmm. and because of that, I had to. The body creates compensations. So, the whole thing about being crippled or wounded. The body is a homeostatic mechanism, and it will compensate as best it can. And it's almost as if you don't have the problem. But I should have had some special treatment. And but modern dance is what saved me, because you have to have tremendous core muscles to be a dancer, mm-hmm. even more so than football or anything else, because the art form is so torsive. And when I started studying at 23, I was finally able to do sit-ups. Now I can do 50 of them, but back then I could do 3. Yeah, so I had nervous scar tissue.
That's kind of backwards. Most people, as they age, can't do as many sit-ups as they used to do, right?
Yeah, well, I work out pretty hard. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go back to high school a little bit here. Is there anything that we haven't covered from high school that you wanted to talk about? Anything that I've missed, maybe?
About what?
About high school, about your time in school?
Well, I was girl crazy, and my parents didn't want me to have a girlfriend. I thought that was really cruel. There was this keep them away from girls. And anyway, that's another story. But high school was, I think athletics saved me. And I had my father had been a college football player, and my mother had been a pre-Olympic diver. And I came from a gifted family of athletes, and I felt kind of inadequate compared to my dad. He played for the Gophers. And yeah, a little feeling of striving to get where my dad was, because he was a pretty amazing person.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me a little bit about that. A little bit more about your dad there.
Well, he was a speed skater, but in high school, they were the Minnesota football team. The three brothers, Tim, Andy, and Bill Glenn, were the backfield for the Minnesota High School All-Stars.
Oh.
And then my dad got into the Gophers as a center linebacker, and I think as a fullback. But in the first game, Bronco Nagurski stepped on him and punctured one of his lungs. 1931. Is that right? Yeah. And that was the end of his career. And he said, "Screw this," He said, "I'm going to law school."
Good choice.
Yeah, good choice. So he ended up clerking for his father, who was a Third Circuit federal judge, and lived in the house with his 6 sisters and brothers. And they did, during the Depression, they did well. My grandfather had a private practice as well. My father was a Republican, and I think there's a lot of snootiness in that, because as a family, they didn't suffer like everybody else did during the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they had it easy. But my dad ran for mayor of St. Paul in 1946 as a Republican. But the guy was not, how do you say, stingy or lacking compassion. Mm-hmm. One of his platforms was to expand the GI Bill. And I was thinking about this the other night, that I come from Scottish people, and my grandfather was a working class guy who wanted to get out of being, working in the baggage department of the Pacific of the train in Minneapolis. And he told his 3 sons, "If you don't go to college," he said, "I'm going to disown you." He was a tough guy. He was a tough Scottish, no nonsense. Well, 2 of the sons became research scientists, and then my grandfather got first in his class in law school. He was a brilliant man. Mm-hmm. And became a federal bankruptcy referee and judge. And he was known for his brilliance, and he was found dead in the river in 1944. Nobody knows what happened. And I think what happened was he was murdered.
Yeah.
I think it was payback for the Depression, and he foreclosed on a corporation. This is what my cousin says. So my father, when he went to court, he always packed a 25 caliber pistol in the shoulder holster, when he go into the courtroom.
Uh-huh.
And the marshal, the federal marshal, was a nice guy, had a tiny office next to my father's office. And the federal marshal always had a pistol, but it was on his hip. And he could look he could look down the entrance and watch anybody who comes into the courtroom. Because probate judges were often targets of very disgruntled people. And his father had been essentially a probate judge on a federal level. So there was a lot of guardedness in my father. He was very discreet.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't like talking politics with me because I was a progressive Democrat.
That must have made for some interesting dinners.
Oh, my God. So Tom Brokaw was married to my cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And one day we were sitting there and Tom Brokaw came on TV and we had a big argument about progressive. He said, "You Democrats are all a bunch of cronies," he said. I don't know what that means.
I think it's just it's another term that people throw out there, isn't it?
Yeah, he just had this. Yeah, he had this thing about Democrats, and I think it goes back to FDR,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe his father, who was a Scottish, and had that Presbyterian dislike of wealthy people or power. So I don't know what it is.
Wow, and interesting that he, became a judge, and actually wielded some power and had some privilege in his life. It's interesting how we sometimes grow differently from the people who raised us.
Yeah, well, one of the you've brought up an intuitive point here. His brother was an opera singer, Timothy Glenn. I used to tell my Uncle Tim, "I wish you were my dad." He'd laugh. But he sang Gilbert and Sullivan when he was 16 years old. He was brilliant. He was a church soloist and sang with the St. Paul Opera. And he worked at 3M as an engineer. And in World War II, he designed the cockpit of the B-25 Mitchell bomber. No college degree, no engineering degree. He used to say to me, he said, "These young punks with these engineering degrees, they come to me telling me what I'm supposed to do."
That's a tale as old as time right there. I'll tell you that, because I remember my dad saying some things like that when he worked in the factories.
Yeah, these young liver snappers.
Exactly. And now we're the old guys talking like that. That's what's funny. But yeah, so you I want to go back just a little bit. Now you make it through high school, and I'm assuming you graduated with a degree or with your diploma.
Yeah, I graduated.
Okay.
I didn't. I think I got C+.
Uh-huh. and then what happens after high school?
Oh, well, this is when the things start to really pop. Well, I was working at 3M in a factory. So my dad raised me. Excuse me?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. So in the summers, I worked in 3M, and then I also worked for my dad in the fishery. Brutal, absolutely brutal work. And I did road construction. I did, and I was a strong kid, so I could handle construction.
Mm-hmm.
But working for my dad was pure hell. And then he just make me work harder,
Yeah.
So, yeah, then I got a job at 3M in the tape department, the mail boy, and all that stuff. And I was getting depressed. I couldn't see how life could get any better. And I was writing reams of poetry. And this girlfriend wanted to get married, and I didn't want to get married. And, it was just a mess. And I had to think of something. My parents were starting to get on my case. They're always on my case, but work harder, Scottish stuff.
Right.
So I remember dreaming up a way to get out of this whole thing. because they were grooming me for 3M. Because my dad's friend was the chairman of finance, and these guys were swinging it. They were in charge, and they were going to protect me. And Vietnam was on the horizon, and my brother got in trouble and ended up in Vietnam. The judge told him he had to go to Vietnam. He threw a smoke bomb off the Eiffel Tower, and it was a federal charge against my brother. He was a prankster.
Yeah.
My brother was brilliant. He was an inventor. And the judge said, "You go to jail or you enlist in the military." So my brother, I volunteered for Vietnam and became a medic. Tough guy. He was always really tough,
Yeah.
And I wasn't. I didn't want anything to do with wars. So my brother was in Vietnam. I thought, well, I'll appeal to my father to lend me money so I could study at the Goethe Institute in Germany. Because I was just interested in getting the hell out.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of energy. And he said, okay. And it was $300, the tuition. So I took all my factory money and got on a plane and landed in Munich in, April of 1967. And then I received a letter from my parents addressed to the school saying, "Your draft notice has arrived."
Oh.
Shit. And there was enclosed, the Department of Defense is informing you that you are something to do with, you're going to be drafted in September of this year, and this is a warning to be, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So then I got bad grades at the Goethe Institute. I was drinking a lot of beer at night. So I left the Goethe Institute and worked in a restaurant in Germany, and I thought, why don't I just stay here? And I was in the Hofbräuhaus about the time Arnold Schwarzenegger was there in May of 1967. I came out the door, and there standing in front of me was my best friend. He had taken a boat, and he knew I hung out at the Hofbräuhaus. And we got talking, and he said, "Look, you got to serve your country. You can't run away from this. You'll regret it for the rest of your life." So I thought about that, and I thought, he's crazy. And then I thought of staying in Germany, and then I thought, well, I could get the GI Bill if I went into the Army. So I finally relented and went back, and that's why I went in the Army.
Okay. Now, when you got your draft notice, did you have the ability to choose the service you want? Could you enlist before you got drafted? How did all that work for you?
Yeah, how do you know all this? I enlisted.
I've interviewed a couple of people, Andy.
I enlisted in the Navy, the Air Force, and something else, but I never signed papers.
Okay.
And I just said, screw this. I'm not going to go back and sign. Let's see. Yeah.
So then I'm assuming your draft number came up then?
Yes, it did. And then I was notified I would have to appear on September 17th downtown. And I was in Germany. I stayed there 6 months. So I came back in August. I had slept in every park bench in Germany. I was having so much fun. I just had endless energy. I was writing poetry, sleeping on park benches.
Just having a great time, right? Just living the life.
Right. And then I met this guitarist who put me up in his garden house. And I looked him up the other day. I remember his name, and he's a famous rock musician in Germany. we were 19,
Yeah.
All this cool stuff happened. So regretfully, I went back and I thought I can get my GI Bill, I can get medical afterwards. And I thought the first thing I did is I applied to the Rototom Dance Academy to study ballet. I thought I could, I did that when I came out of the Army. So I went into the Army, came out of the Army, went back to Germany, and in 72, I applied for the Ballet Academy for the GI Bill, but they turned me down. The Army turned me down. So I went to Germany once. After the service, I went back to Germany and then returned to the United States to study dance.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go back though to you're in the Army, right? So you go to so how does this work? You get your draft notice, your number comes up, and then do you go before the draft board, or do you go for your physical? How does that work?
This was a moment of great chagrin. I was totally unprepared. I didn't understand how to get out of the Army, how to get 1A, I can't remember. So there were these men staring at me, and they said, "Well, Mr. Glenn, you've applied for conscientious objector. Are you a member of the Latter-day Saints or any church that renounces war and killing?" And I said, "No." And they kind of looked at each other and they said, "Well, unless it's not good enough that you as an individual do not want to kill people, you have to be a member of a church." And I said, "Well, I'm a member of St. John Evangelist." They said, "That's not good enough." And they said, "You've been denied." The guy just looked at me. He said, "You've been denied."
Wow. And then from there you get scheduled for your physical?
Really cold. Yeah, and then I tried to get out with my football knee, but the doctor wouldn't do it.
Right.
He was honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's doing his job, right?
Yeah.
So for all your work to not go into the military, it sounds like at every turn that's the direction you're headed.
Yeah, it was like a canoe hitting rocks, bouncing off.
Right. So you get through your physical, everything's done. They're like, "You're qualified. You're going in the military." Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah.
All right. And did you have time between then till the time you went to basic, or did you just go to basic right away?
Oh, God, we got on a plane in 2 days, and that's when I felt this really weird psychic depression. First time in my life I felt at a loss. Sitting on that bus when it pulled out of downtown. Mm-hmm. But then, after the flight to Fort Campbell, it was like an epiphany. I got off the plane, and it was raining, it was cold, and it was 8 o'clock in the morning. And the sergeant came up to me, he said, "Your soul belongs to Jesus, but your ass belongs to me." And we all laughed.
Yeah, he wasn't joking though, was he?
He wasn't joking. And I just felt this like fight, survival, a bolt of energy. I just felt this. So like 2 days later, I was the sergeant said, "Anybody here have military experience, know how to march?" And I said, I put up my hand, said, "I know how to march because of SPA." Mm-hmm. So he said, march the company over to the barber shop. And I did it correctly. I said, calm left march, at will over the bridge. And they all went down in the culvert, and they got lost. Uh-huh. And it was right out of Bill Murray, it was just hysterical.
Oh no.
So after that, we got our haircuts, and then the sergeant came up to me. We took tests. The sergeant was this little black man with a wandering eye that when he looked at you, go, his one eye would be stationary and the other eye would go back and forth to the right and the left. He's looking at me and he says, "You have the highest intelligence." He says, "You have the highest intelligence scores in the history of the 7th Division." And I thought, well, this is bullshit.
Right?
But what if it's true? And he said, "You've been recommended for General Staff College if you become an officer. You'd be immediately transferred to General Staff College with an IQ that high." And I said, "What is it?" He said, 139 out of 140. So I don't know what that means. So I said, "Okay, I'll take the OCS test." And then I opened Stars and Stripes and it said, average life of second lieutenants, 6 weeks.
Yeah, that will cause you to rethink that decision, right?
Well, I went and took the test anyway. And I got halfway through it, and then I just started to fill in the blanks randomly.
Uh-huh.
I thought, I can't do this. If I succeed, I'm just going to keep going forward and I'll become an officer and then I'll go to Vietnam, I'll get killed. Well, my brother was in Vietnam. I didn't think of that.
Right.
So the test came out. I missed by 1 point. You know, I filled it out randomly.
Yeah, that's imagine if you'd actually taken the rest of the test.
Yeah.
So you don't get accepted to OCS clearly, and you went back to just your regular basic training then?
Yeah, that's right.
How far into basic training were you when you had been asked to take the test?
3 days.
Oh, so pretty quickly.
Yeah, it blew my mind. You know, I remember getting on the bus from the center in St. Paul and being transported to the airport, and I just felt this cold depression come over me, and I'll never forget that feeling. It was the realization that I was somewhere else. You know? Right.
You know, not necessarily by choice. This is where you were going.
Yeah, and I'd been on a lot of adventures in my life. I went to Germany and I studied, and I was a ski racer. I did all these dangerous things, but I finally met my match.
Absolutely. But now I think you were saying though that by the time you got there and got off the bus, your feelings had changed a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. The plane landed, and it was a cold, rainy day at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and it was like a beautiful example of Murray, the comedian. You know, he's standing there, and the DI comes by and says, "Your soul belongs to Jesus, but your ass belongs to me." And I just had this sudden exhilaration that I was leaving one way of life and entering another.
Yeah, and that's a great way to put it, because I think that's, for a lot of people, that's how that feels. And so, kind of walk us through basic training and what was that like for you?
Well, everything was kind of neat and tidy. And I'd gone to a military school, a country day school, where we wore uniforms. So some of the regimentation wasn't, it looked like, like Camp Widgiewagon with cabins all over the place. And then I remember my watch was stolen the first day. And the first day when we got into our barracks, my father gave me a watch.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And then I thought, I got to do something, what is this all about? And then the corporal said, does anybody here know how to march? And I said, I do, which is only, I knew how to march because of D&B training in the school.
Right.
That's kind of like Trump, you went to a military school.
Okay.
So I jumped out in front of the company, and nobody knew how to march. So I said, let's see, right flank.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody knew what, turn right flank, and nobody knew what that meant. And I said, forward march. And so these guys were all falling all over each other. It was a Bill Murray scene,
I was going to say, it sounds like something right out of Stripes.
It was, when I saw Stripes, I thought, this is exactly what, they really nailed it. And I was Bill Murray,
Right.
And I think, and these guys, I said, proceed at will over the bridge. And they went right into the culvert, which the bridge was over the culvert. And they were milling around. And I said, okay, you guys, attention. And then let's go up to the bridge, and we're going to the barber shop. And the corporal was laughing, And I wasn't very confident, but I was kind of spitting this stuff out, thinking on my feet. And so when we got to the barbershop, that's when I read that Stars and Stripes thing about second lieutenants living six weeks.
Right.
And he moved in, the corporal really moved on me fast. He says, we have these, I have this intelligence test, and you have the highest scores in the history of the regiment. And the company commander says you could be at General Staff College, And so my mind was going, let's see.
Right. Just not in the cards, right? It's not in the cards.
It's not in the cards.
Yeah.
Well, I was really attracted to the idea, and my father had been a commander in the Navy, and my uncles were officers, and but that I was thinking, do I want to kill people, and do I want to lead men in battle? And I thought, not really.
Right. Yeah, and it's it's not a bad thing, right? It's not for everybody.
Yeah. And it was, I could remember that moment thinking, I better not fuck this up.
Right.
This is serious stuff.
Right. Yeah. So I'm assuming you all made it to the barbershop then and got your hair cut.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything else aside. So kind of how was the rest of basic training? Did you get these guys in shape to march, or did you give up, or how'd that work out?
Let's see. At Fort Campbell, it was beautiful. Fall was beautiful, as my memories, and it was just the usual. And there was a hard time where I called my mother on the phone. Oh, it was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
I was so depressed, And then, but I remember this scene where the company was in formation, and captain came out, and he had pearl-handled 45s. He had pearl-handled cowboy, like 6-shooters.
Yeah.
With the butt of the pistols facing forward, and he was standing in a 40-degree rain in a sweater. And I thought, this guy's really a hard guy, And there was a big commotion on the left, and these two African American gentlemen decided to sit down and refuse. And they sat down and said, "We ain't doing nothing." And
oh boy!
I looked at the guy next to me, and I thought, and he was a Hispanic, and he said, "They be out soon." And the next day, we're in formation, and the company commander pointed at this Jeep, and he said, "They've been kicked out of the military. It's a warning." So that was kind of an interesting memory.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think you see all sorts of things in basic training, right? I mean, I recall a guy in Navy basic training that wanted to go AWOL, so he jumped the fence, but ended up in Marine Corps basic training where they kept him for 2 weeks. So,
oh, jeez.
So it takes all kinds, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And then I lost my ID, and I had to go in front of the captain, and he said, Private Glenn, are you going to be a problem? And I said, I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand. And he said, follow me. And so he said, open your footlocker. So we went down to the barracks, and I had books on Marxism. I had a book on Marxism. And then I had a book called Love's Body by Norman Brown, which is a radical, and it was kind of a radical existentialist book on erotic freedom. And he's looking at these books. He said, are you going to be a problem, Private Glenn? Are you a communist? And I said, no, sir. No, sir. I just like to read.
Yeah, they don't take too kindly to Marxist books in basic training, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was clueless, of course.
Right.
But I was an intellectual, and I wrote poetry, and that's all I wanted to do.
Uh-huh.
Was.
So did you find that to reconcile that? Was it like difficult going through basic training then, having having that sort of ambition?
Yeah, I couldn't understand why I was there. Well, I understood why I was there, but I felt out of sync with the whole thing. Like if I had gone to OCS or something, then I would have been part of it. So I felt disappointed, that life was like this.
Right. Right.
So I slept along,
Kind of did what you had to do and got by.
Yeah, and I won the low crawl. It's the 10-yard low crawl. I got the record in the platoon for crawling fast under barbed wire, which was remarkable. I thought I was overweight, and then I did okay on PT and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Now, was being overweight, was that an issue? While you're in boot camp, or did that just sort of kind of resolve itself?
You have a way of nailing it. Yes, it was an issue. I had this the staff sergeant. He was oh my God, this guy was like Jack LaLanne,
Yeah.
Just fit as can be and proud to be in the military. I had these eyes that were almost messianic. I thought, this guy's nuts. But he did me a great favor. He singled me out in front of the platoon and said, some of us in the United States Army use food as an excuse for their emotions. And I thought, God, he's really nailed me, because I was getting kind of a gut,
Uh-huh.
So, and I didn't like it. I didn't like I was 185 and 170 pound. 170 pounds would be right for me, and
Yeah.
So I was kind of ashamed.
Yeah, I think that would be tough for anybody. And so as you go along in basic training, is there anything else that kind of sticks out in your mind before you graduate?
Well, I started juggling. I started, on the marksmanship courses and marches. When there was spare time, I'd juggle because I used to juggle.
Uh-huh.
And somebody said, "Hey, you should be in the entertainment business." And they thought I was pretty funny, and I'd crack jokes. And these were Southern boys for the most part, and then Hispanic, and they'd laugh at me because my jokes were so odd.
Well, I want to be honest. We've done 140 of these, and I never had a sentence start out with, "I learned how to juggle in basic training."
Yeah, well, the Stones. You remember the broken rocks?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just pick them up and juggle. I was bored stiff. So later in life, I became I could juggle 4 balls well on the stage. That was part of my act, 20 years later.
Right. So I mean, that's a transferable skill you learned in basic training right there.
Yeah, and taking apart those anti-personnel mines,
Uh-huh.
God, that was so boring. The poor lieutenant would say, "No, this is a fuse. You screw this in," and I think, oh my God, anybody could learn this.
Right.
But,
I think the difficulty is for a lot of people, especially intelligent folks, is when you go to any school, really, basic training is just a school, really. You have to bring it down to the lowest common denominator, which doesn't help the guy who's bored because it's like, are you kidding me? I don't, this is super easy. But
then I'd fall asleep, and somebody whacked me in the back of my helmet.
Right. That'll wake you up. So you get through basic training then, and then what was your MOS or your job in the Army at this point?
Yeah, 11 Bravo.
Oh, okay. So infantry.
Yeah, weapons. It was a weapons platoon.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Let's see. I was good. I was expert with a 45, marksman with the M650. What was it? M14.
M14. Yeah.
Yeah, and but with the 50 caliber, I was an expert with. I got expert on that. So that was my MO. My specialty was the 50 cal.
Mm-hmm.
Noisy bugger. Oh, jeez.
Oh yeah, we still used them when I was deployed in 2006. We're still using the 50 cal, the Ma Deuce. It's crazy.
Yeah, chunk.
Yeah, it does a lot of damage too. That's
oh,
for sure.
Jeez.
So now, did you go? Was your AIT right there at basic then as well? So you just kind of stayed there? Did you go someplace else?
See, we went home for Christmas, and then I went on to AIT in California, and that was lovely. It was it's now a wine region, but it was next to where Clint Eastwood was mayor, Carmel.
Oh, Carmel, yep.
Yeah, and it was a really pretty place. And that's where I learned, dead reckoning, compass, direct. And then I was leading a platoon with compass, and we won the compass orientation. These guys were knuckleheads. I had to scream at them, So, all you have to do is take the azimuth and go 150 yards and stop and plant the stick. They go, "What do you mean?"
Well, in honestly, I mean, it's no small feat to be good at that because a lot of people struggle with land navigation. It's anybody who hasn't been in the military, they give you a compass and they give you a map with grid squares on it, and they give you a what's that little tool they give you to use the you know what I'm talking about. Anyway.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, it's a little plastic square with some lines on it, and you've got to get from point A to point B, and sometimes you have to go around obstacles and lots of other things, swamps and hills, and if you don't know what you're doing, it's easy to get lost.
Yeah, this is Sonoma Valley, and there was this very gentle rolling hills, and I would say we have to I said, I want you guys to reorient every 50 feet. And the guy would say, "What do you mean reorient?" I said, "Well, you want to stay on the azimuth. You have to keep taking the direction. So you're on the correct azimuth. There's always going to be a deviation of 30, 40 feet. And he says, "What do you mean?" But I used to survey with my father. So
you kind of had a leg up, right?
I had a small leg up, yeah.
And that little plastic thing's called a protractor. That's what it's called.
Yeah, protractor. I remember that. I just threw it out. But yeah, we ended up doing that. That felt good. And then I kept thinking of Hollywood. I remember, the beautiful scenes around, thinking I could be in Hollywood right now. I was not in the Army. Anyway.
But there you were. So you make it through AIT. And where do you go from there?
this was some tough stuff. We had our 3-day no sleep, or 1 day no sleep, 1 day no food. I can't remember. And I things got tense because orders are being cut for Vietnam, and this is the height of the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And the sergeants just kind of disappeared and left us in the bay. And there was a cadet sergeant who was, we were all the same age, and he was a snooty Germanic-looking guy, kind of arrogant.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to NCO school, and then I'm going to Vietnam. But that didn't bother me. He started dissing a Jewish guy in the unit. He started talking anti-Semitism, and I just saw red because I'm very affiliated with Jewish people, very close to them.
Right.
And he said, "You and me are going to settle this." So he came back in the bay, and the next thing I knew, I stretched him out on the floor. And then he picked up a fire extinguisher and threw it at me. And then we duked it out, and it was a draw kind of a thing. And then we became friends afterwards, of course, like John Wayne.
Right.
I was kind of uncomfortable with that. So I'm standing in the middle of the bay, and I broke into tears. He's on the bunk I broke his nose. He's holding his nose. And this Mexican guy came up to me, and there's a lot of the Mexican guys were in there for felonies. There was about 10 who were Hell's Angels in Los Angeles, and these guys were rough customers. And he came up to me, he said, "Hey man, why you crying, man? You kick his ass, man." And I said, "Oh, hey, Jose, chill out." So then the company commander, this new company commander, heard about it, and he took me into his quarters, and there was a big picture of LBJ, or was it Nixon? I can't remember. And I started to snivel again, and he said, "Just knock this shit off." He says, "You're a good soldier. What's all this sniveling? We don't want any babies in our company." And I said, "I'm done with this place." He said, "You're about to get promoted. What are you talking about?" So I learned my lesson there. And then there was a lot of crazy stuff going on. We had a capture the flag thing where if you got caught, you got put in a coffin.
Oh.
It's war games. So I hid out. I hid out and refused to expose myself. And I survived, and a couple of guys got put in the box. I don't like that kind of thing. So what happened after that? Then the orders came, and I remember thinking they can't send me to Vietnam because my brother's there. And I had this kind of figured out, sort of. It never occurred to me that my brother a week before could have been killed or wounded or moved out of Vietnam, and then I could have been sent to Vietnam. It's never occurred to me.
Right.
And then there's the Shannon law, I think it's called, where two brothers cannot serve in the same combat zone unless there's a triangulated agreement between the parents and the sons or daughters, where it's voluntary. Now, I didn't know the specifics of that, but I just had this feeling I wasn't going to Vietnam. And they took the company, and right around H or J, it was everybody beyond the letter G went to Vietnam, and everything from G to A went to Korea. And I thought, I was wrong, that they just divided us alphabetically. So I went, oh, thank God. And so after that, we just got on the plane, and I landed in Kimpo. And I landed, and this is the clincher. you can't write this stuff in screenplays.
Right.
We get off the plane, it's 18 below zero, and they're issuing weapons as we're stepping off the bus inside the hangar, where we were being issued one clip and an M14. And I said to the sergeant, "What's going on?" And he said, "Red alert. We are technically at war with North Korea." And I thought, oh, this is just a war game. And it wasn't.
It was the real thing.
It was the real thing. I thought, And I didn't feel panicky. And other people were nervous as heck. But I was thinking, And then as we're getting on these buses, we got on buses. No, we got on another flight. See, we gave the weapons away. Then we got another flight. We landed in, I think I have my airport screwed up. We went from Japan, I think it was in Kimpo, that we were issued the weapons. And then we gave the weapons up, and then we took buses to this god-awful place. It was Camp Humphreys, but it was a kind of a holding area, and there was no heat. There were 50-gallon diesel heaters inside these Quonset. These are aluminum Quonset huts. And I thought, these things aren't insulated. It's 18 below zero. I'm from Minnesota. And it's, and it was just freezing. And we had no plumbing, and we had steel toilet seats in this concrete outhouse. There's no warm water. And the Southern boys were like looking at each other like, what the hell did we get into? And I said, oh, this is nothing. It's just cold. So they hated me, I think.
Yeah.
That's from Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
So then we went, we were transferred to Camp Humphreys. And, Camp Humphreys was about 400 acres. And it was really an ammo depot for the train, the old train line that the Japanese built from Seoul down to Camp Humphreys. Mm-hmm. And it had a small airport, which the French built after the war, World War II.
And interestingly enough, though, I mean, this is kind of off topic, but the French had also been in Vietnam before we were there. Right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
But the French, I don't know, they may have been contracted to build this airport. But, the South Atlantic Treaty Organization made it that there was a transfer of power from back to the South Koreans who had been independent, but from 1939 or something until 1945, they had been under Japanese jurisdiction. So I don't know where the French, of course, were in Vietnam and as of 1945. So they must have had CETO units, because the CETO was French, British, Dutch, and Turkish and American soldiers. There were 5 UN contributions to the CETO system, which was to guard Southeast Asia. And the Turks, we never met. I never met a Turkish soldier, but everybody was scared of him. There was a small, military installation, and nobody went near the Turks because they were extremely violent.
Oh, yeah.
The South Korean police were scared to death of these guys. So, so there I was in Camp Humphreys, and it was just a bunch of Quonset huts. There was no movie theater. It looked like a MASH set. There was, if you saw a movie, it was in the chow hall. There was no gymnasium, no anything. So we were really bored. It was a boring place to be.
It doesn't sound like there was a lot to do. It was ridiculously cold. It just doesn't sound all that great.
No, it sucked, actually. So I'm sitting in the barracks. I'm overweight and thinking, what the heck, you know? And then walks this guy who looks like a movie star. He looked like, I thought he was a colonel. He had 4 white bars in his shoulder, and he held himself with great dignity, and he had sunglasses, which were reflective, and a little guy next to him. And he looked around arrogantly at most of us sitting there smoking pot, you know, and he said, I am Sung Chung. I am a recently commissioned second lieutenant in the Korean Army, and I would like to start a karate class here. Are anybody interested? He was actually ROTC. And I just looked at him. I said, yes, this is my key to get out, you know.
Right.
And it turned out to be a great friendship. And in spite of the fact that his English was terrible. But I saw things that are just, you know, it's like I told you before, it was like that French karate guy going to Asia to study with the master. Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yes.
And I wasn't that skilled at karate, but I had a pot belly. And I'll tell you, in 1 month, that pot belly was gone.
He kind of whipped you into shape, huh?
Oh, my God. And they taught me not to, Chung would say, self-pity is for women.
Oh.
Well, he was a hard man. And then he and Lee, we go to a beer hall in South Korea, and they'd put cigarettes out in each other's palms, staring at each other to see who would flinch first. That was too much for me.
Sounds like something out of a really bad karate movie.
Yeah, exactly. And one day, Lee and Chung showed up, and there were about 4 students, and Chung had his arm in a sling, and then Lee had a bandage around his head. And I said, uh-oh, what happened? I'd hate to see the other guys. And Chung said, oh, we have rumble with gangsters.
Oh, no.
He said, 3 go to hospital. He said, I put 3 out. Oh, man, these guys were hard.
That sounds really, really tough. So they start setting up this karate school then with you.
Yeah. So I went to Lieutenant Leeper, who was pot-bellied, and I started to become a kind of a jerk because I believe that everybody should be physically fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I quit drinking beer, and I should have gone through the sergeant. I jumped the chain of command, and I went to Leeper's Quonset hut, and I knocked on the door, and he said, enter, and I said, he looked at me quizzically, and I said, sir, and I saluted him. I said, I'm Private Glenn, and I would like to request that we get a Quonset hut for our karate club. And he looked at me and said, what? And he looked like personally offended.
Uh-huh.
And my mistake was, in that sense, was, and Colonel Jones said, if you need anything, come to me. And I didn't realize that, you know, what was I doing? Well, and he stood up and he said, who do you think you are? He said, you should have gone through the sergeant. And I said, well, I couldn't find the sergeant. So we got our Quonset hut.
Oh.
Yeah, he was angry. He was angry at me. And then I invited him. I said, why don't you come? You know, we had 4 or 5 sergeants and privates.
So you had a pretty good group that wanted to participate then.
Yeah, but most of them bailed out. It was too hard.
Uh-huh. What was it? What was as you're, so you got your Quonset hut set up, you're ready to start training folks. What was like a typical training session that made people not want to participate?
Korean karate it's very athletic. It's almost a dance form, and it involves a lot of kicking and a lot of punching in a kind of a rectilinear manner. It's not like the Japanese forms, which are more graceful, like Bruce Lee. It's really based on very high kicks and side kicks, very gymnastic, and it requires a fair amount of coordination, but it's mostly boring. So it's boring in the sense that it's just hard work, like calisthenics. And but I was a fanatic, and then Lee and Chung gave a demonstration, and for the battalion, and we had all these chairs lined up and stacks of roof tiles, and Chung would come out, and I'd hold roof tiles, and I'd hold them up, and he'd break them. It's called hupchagi. He would jump and break the tiles with the bottom of his feet. Pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, I've seen him, like break small, 1x boards in half and stuff like that. But I think roof tile is a little tougher than that, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, they're old cement roof tiles, and they're not quite as tough, I think, as modern roof tiles. And then Chung, he says, stack up 14, put towel on top. And he bent over and he cracked all 14 right down to the bottom. And the colonel was sitting there, the majors and the lieutenants, and they're going, oh my God.
Were they thinking that maybe they wanted to make this required training?
I don't know. And I was like a green belt. After a year, I was a green belt. And with all my training, I was heading for a black belt, and I didn't think I could pass the test. So the company went out to Woju, and then we came back to Camp Humphreys. And, in the meantime, I'm standing guard around Anyang-ri, which is the village across the river. So every 2-3 days, myself and a Katusa, a Korean soldier, would, get our ammo and our backpacks and guns, and we trooped to the top of these hills, around Anyang. And the hills were maybe 800 feet high. And it was all bitch and moan all the way, because in the summer it'd be slipping and sliding. And there were no trees. The trees might have been a foot high. So I'd sit on an outpost for 24 hours, sleep up there, eat up there. So that was the duty around Camp Humphreys.
That doesn't sound very pleasant.
No, it wasn't. It was kind of brutal, actually.
So, but I do have a question though, Andy. So, I know that we talked about how you like to read and how you're intellectual. When you're out on these outposts, it sounds to me like there's not a whole lot going on there. Were you able to take that opportunity to, do some reading or just do some contemplative thinking? I mean, were there things that you did to kind of pass the time?
Yeah, that was exactly. I had practiced my karate katas. Like I'd divide my time between pounding sandbags to toughen, trying to get where I could, to a point where I could break objects, which I never could do anyway. But then I'd practice karate, then I practiced meditation. But mostly I read, and it's very hard to get books. But I got The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by Schur, which is 2,000 pages long. And I'd read at night to the light of the stove. The stove was like 3 feet long and a foot deep, and it had a gas carburetor on the top. So it would flash every second. Mm-hmm. When the gasoline would drip in, it would go whoosh, and it would light up, and I would read, but I blink as I was reading, because it would go out and it would come back on, or I'd have a flashlight, a little tiny pen light, and I'd read the book as best I could in that light. And then I enrolled in a correspondence course, and I studied, 5 credits in English, I think it was. English and history. And I completed the correspondence course over that period of a year while I was sitting on the outposts.
Wow. So you kept yourself occupied, for sure.
Yeah, I was occupied, not really bored. It was kind of dangerous, actually.
Right. Because it's not, I don't, in hearing your description and comparing it to the descriptions of people who were in Korea much later on in the 90s and the early 2000s, it's really changed since then, of course.
Oh, yeah. I Googled Camp Humphreys. It's now 4 square miles of hotels, health spas. And it's just disgusting.
Right. So back to your dojo. How many of your fellow soldiers actually stuck with it then?
They all fell out, all 5 of them.
So it was just you.
Yeah, they never even got to a green belt. They just quit. And one was a sergeant. I said, "Why'd you quit?" And he said, "Oh, it's too much work, man."
Wow.
It's just me. Yeah. I had. This is like studying piano with 2 of the greatest, pianists in the world, and I had them for a year. And then they take me out and wine and dine me. And one day we ended up. This is hilarious. I went to an officers club, and I told Chung, I can't go in there. I said, "Well, you're a guest. I'm a second lieutenant." And I said, "I want you to meet my uncle. He's the commander of the ROTC unit at Seoul University." So let's see. I was in uniform. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I wasn't in uniform. I was wearing a baseball cap. So we go into his office, and here's this man behind a desk and another officer who's a general or something. And so these people were upper class Koreans. I didn't know that. And he introduces me as So-ee Glenn. So-ee means second lieutenant.
Oh, got a promotion, did you?
Yeah, and then he elbows me. And I looked at him, "What are you elbowing?" He said, "Take off hat."
Oh.
And the colonel's looking at me, bored stiff. And he asked me a question. Then we went to dinner, and there was a beautiful woman sitting across the table. She was just gorgeous. And his uncle and the general were sitting there, and the minister of finance of Korea was on the right. I'm not making this stuff up. The woman was the daughter of the minister of finance of South Korea. And Chung was the son of a general. That general there was his father. And he says, "I am presenting So-ee Glenn. He is now my student, and he will take his black belt test in 1 month." And I said, "What?"
That was news to you, huh?
Yeah, I was like being thrown into this thing,
Right.
And as we were leaving, he says, "No, I want you to sign out a quart of scotch." And I said, "Like, only officers can do that." And he said, "Well, don't put lieutenant, just put a different name there." So that was my only act of evil.
Stealing a bottle of scotch. I'm not sure that's too evil there, Andy.
No, I bought it.
Yeah.
Then I told Chung that I wanted a date with this woman. I was getting pretty haughty.
Yeah.
And he said, no, date her. No, very bad. And he wouldn't talk about that.
Do you think that maybe, I mean, since his father was a general and this other guy is the finance minister, do you think they were trying to set him up with her? With your
God, that's really good.
Your
I never
sensei?
thought of that. I never thought of that because he was kind of the golden guy.
Yeah.
He was, Chung was really, I thought he was really brilliant, very older than his years. Yeah, Chung had this charisma. It was just unreal.
Uh-huh.
He was about 5'11", 175 pounds.
So
go
ahead.
Yeah, he acted like Napoleon. I could see why people didn't like him.
Uh-huh.
Chest out, kind of dramatic.
Kind of puffed up.
Puffed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, did you end up getting your black belt a month later?
Yeah. He took me on these things to toughen me up because he said it's going to get tough from now on.
And weren't you thinking it's already tough?
It's already tough. So he had us running at 6 o'clock in the morning through the village, barefoot in our gis. Gi is your outfit.
Uh-huh.
And he was parading me all over the place, actually. And I went to a party or two, and they were very humble affairs because the people were poor. You drink makgeolli out of a little aluminum saucer. It's delicious. It tastes like bananas, and you get really smashed. So we would go to these makgeolli huts and just get bombed, And I got in trouble because I stayed out. I was off limits. And my sergeant said he was going to beat me up if I ever did it again. He hated my guts. Now, this is a side, kind of a segue. Wendland was a nice guy. He really cared a lot about people. He was an Alabama dirt farmer, and he had an 8th grade education. He didn't like arrogant people, and he thought I was arrogant. He thought Chung and me were arrogant. And one day he said, I went into the EM club, and he said, and those guys stood up and turned around. They said, and he said, if you ever go off limits again, we're going to beat the crap out of you. He had this Southern accent, like, y'all going to ever do that again, we're going to kick your ass. So I stayed away from, Wendell was a friend, but then I stayed away from him. And then like 2 or 3 months later, I was up in the CP and there was shots rang out. And there was an old Korean War veteran sitting there, and I liked this guy. He'd tell me war stories. He said, hit the deck. And a round bounced off one of the buildings. And it was Wendland having a shootout with a black man. And that's the last we saw of Wendland. Sergeant Wendland was...
These were two American soldiers having a shootout with each other there in Korea.
In front of the EM club, and he shot the guy's left ear off. And after that, nobody said anything about Wendland, Sergeant Wendland.
Wow. Makes you kind of wonder what that was all about.
Well, Wendland was, underneath it all, was a really angry man.
Yeah.
He had a sour look to him. He looked kind of like Patton. He had a real sour look to his face. So anyway, getting back to the karate, we would run for 4 or 5 miles in the dark. I'd say to Chung, what if we step on glass? And he said, glass no hurt you. He was unreal, and he was right. He said, it'll make you watch where you are stepping. He said, you must use your mind over your body. God, he taught me a real beautiful lesson. And I never cut my feet. And my feet, we do this a lot, and my feet became really, really tough, like leather, And we'd run in the winter, too. So, and he'd say, feet no freeze, always move. And that we didn't do too much of that. But the black belt test, I was exhilarated, and he really believed in me. And he took me to this gymnasium with very old, like 100-year-old dark oak walls. And on the wall was Kong Ik Lee, who was the South Korean Mudokwan Taekwondo master. He was like a 9th degree. And it's just an old guy on the wall with a grim face. And then there was a table with 3 men, very stern-looking people. And whenever you enter a dojo, you bow to the picture and the Korean flag. Mm-hmm. I still have these. I still have my karate certificate. In the center is a fist, a silver fist, and then you have the Korean flag above it. And then you have Kang Ik Lee's face, and then you have hexagrams, the various hexagrams that signify east, west, north, and south. And I have to say a lot about Mudokwan. It's really a religion, and a lot of people don't understand this. That although in its lower form, it's a fighting form. Its higher form, it's a form of a form of spiritual mastery. And in the center is the country, and it's based upon an allegiance to the Korean people, which really drives a lot of this reunification energy, is the sense of the Korean people having, been subjected to Japanese domination and Chinese domination through the years. They still maintain they're almost secret societies. And so when you fight, you don't fight to hurt the opponent. It's counting coup. It's very much like the American Indians. As you go into battle, you don't go into battle to kill. You have massive self-control. So when you spar with an individual, you draw the punch within an inch. It could be a killer punch, but it's not like boxing, and it's not like what's happened to karate in this country, which is it's a fighting form. Mm-hmm. It's a dance of self-mastery. And it's just extraordinary when I think about this. What I was going through, I didn't understand that at that time. I did intuitively. And Chung would say, no emotion allowed. You get angry, or you've been angry. Do not. And they would hit me. They would hit me on the shoulder with what's called a dragon's tooth. If I got mad at the two of them and I was sparring with them, they'd whack me. And then they'd stand back and laugh. And I get really mad. And then I'd start laughing. So they taught me how to grow up and really take the hits of life.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, your description is really, I don't know, I find it intriguing because, yeah, you do think of martial arts as a form of violence or fighting, but you're really describing it here as a discipline or religion, which puts a whole different kind of light on the practice.
Yes, and it's not that it cannot be used as a tool of violence. It is only as a last resort. But in the sparring, the young people have to, I've seen young black belts in Korea, just incredible. But they get angry, the jealousies. And so the masters have to take them aside and say, look, I want you two to shake hands. It's a common theme in these karate movies. But getting back to the test, so there I was, and Chung said, no problem, you just do it. I said, do what? He said, you will know now. He said, stand in the middle of the room, bow to the 3 men. And I went out to the middle of the room and I bowed to the 3 men. I'm alone in this gymnasium, and out of the left door comes this man who must have been 7 feet tall. He's probably 6'5", slender in build, dressed in black. And out of the right door comes a short man dressed in white. and they proceed to a point on the floor, and they turn left and they come at me diagonally, just staring at me. So I stood my ground, and the next thing I know, this long leg sweeps around and catches my nose.
Oh my gosh.
Like, oh my God, how'd this guy know that he could get that close to me? And that's a coup to get so close that you brush somebody. That's like 5 points. And I went after him because he was the most dangerous looking. Meanwhile, the other guy is coming from behind, and I fight him out, and I'm quick. So all I remember, there was just a flurry of arms and legs and spins. And then I hear this, Chugi, stop. And they both bow to me, and they go back through their doors. And it lasted about 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I had it was like, I don't even remember what I did.
So I'm curious, it didn't last that long, but did it feel like it was a longer period of time?
It felt like an eternity. I felt like I was fighting for my life, because that guy, first thing he did was he jumped in the air, a reverse spin kick, and brushed my nose. And I didn't even have time to react. And the other guy tried to knock my legs out from underneath me, and I screwed him up.
Uh-huh.
I got away from him, and I got away from both these guys, which was, I didn't go in for the attack. I had no idea how to attack them. And then we left, and Trump says, tomorrow you will know. And we had a beer, and then he said, you pass.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Well, do you feel like part of that test was to see if you would get angry?
Yes, and it was to see the instinctive reaction, the instinct of the individual. It's
Right.
more than the ability to parry or, like these fabulous stunts you see. Van Damme was an incredible, could deliver technical blows, a genius level athlete. It wasn't about that. It was about handling a situation that was hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
These guys could have killed me instantly.
So was there a certain level of fear for you while you were doing this?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to me. I feel like I would have been terrified, but maybe your training.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, listeners, we need your help to keep the Veterans Archives podcast going. We're a nonprofit dedicated to preserving the stories of our nation's heroes, and we provide this service completely free to veterans. Your support helps us record, share, and archive these incredible stories so future generations never forget the sacrifices made for our freedom. Every donation, big or small, makes a difference. Visit veteransarchives.org to contribute today. Help us honor their service by ensuring their voices are heard. And thank you for your support, and thank you to all the veterans who have served our country.
I think that's what they liked. I never had a sense. I always knew that, my two teachers could have, destroyed me.
Uh-huh.
Maybe not. I don't know. But I'm thinking now that, having been a performer in the arts all my life, that the thing auditioners look for is a certain kind of fearlessness, a duende spirit in the moment. And if you have that, it makes you a good commander, a good platoon lieutenant. He knows how to control a situation. It comes from nowhere. I don't know where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're better black belts. First degree black belt is nothing. It's just the beginning.
And yet for some people, I think they see that as the goal, right? To become a black belt. They don't realize maybe that there's more to it than just that.
Yeah, exactly. Like drinking makgeolli with his relative, going to dinner party, getting to know Koreans, getting to know the culture, or I completely left the consciousness of being, well, not really. I was still a soldier, but
Right.
I was in my hobby space, or whatever you want to call it. Then I started reading Korean poetry, trying to learn to speak Korean, which didn't work out very well. But
Well, I think if you circle back in what we were talking about, kind of at the start of your journey in the martial arts, is that this particular discipline is really about the Korean people and the unity. And reflecting, I think it's interesting that your teacher took you to these places, had you meet his family to really kind of, in a good way, integrate you with the Korean people, so you really kind of understood what you were doing.
yes, I appreciate that now. Thinking about what Chung was doing, he took me up to a Zen monastery. I can't remember. I was in uniform. He took me up to, I think he stole me. He came up to my guard posts, and the Katusa was up there, and I went down in the valley with him and to this little tiny thing inside of the mountain. It was a little hut, and there were two Buddhist monks sitting there. And he just wanted me to see these people.
Mm-hmm.
It was very nice. Yeah.
Sounds very peaceful.
Yeah, there was a side to Chung. He was only 22, and what that thing you touched on is very true. To get a sense of the Korean people, how intensely unified they were and efficient, and the poverty. These kids around Camp Humphreys were very poor, ragged clothes, and the farmers in the valleys, and they had thatched roofed houses and oxen. But what I wanted to say about the black belt test, about a week later, he brought me my uniform, and it was laced in black. It's just this beautiful black hem around the gi, and the black belt had my name in English, and on the reverse side was in Korean. And that was really beautiful feeling.
Yeah, that just sounds amazing. It really does.
Yeah, and these guys back in the bay where I stayed, they didn't know what to think anymore. And then Lieutenant Leeper made me the squad leader, and I'd take them out on patrols and stuff. But they started to respect me.
Finish your black belt test, and I'm not really sure where we're at in your deployment.
Oh, well, I'm at the end. I mustered out April 21st, and I think the black belt test was April 4th. And so let's see. So that's where we ended. Yeah, it was very, getting the karate uniform was really great. That embroidery, and it's in the pictures I sent you. Did you get the pictures?
I got a notification. They'll be here today.
Oh yeah, it shows me putting out a candle with my feet without tipping the candle over, putting out the flame. And there's a lot of other photos of me with pictures of Song Chung, the two instructors, and there's a picture of my brother in Vietnam as a village medic. So I think you'll find that interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait to see those. And so actually, shortly after your black belt, you're leaving Korea. How was that for you? What was it like to leave after? It sounds like a pretty good experience.
Actually, it was. And, you had the calendar inside your locker
Yeah.
and had 440 boxes to check off. And it was kind of a whirlwind. I couldn't believe I was leaving, but I wanted to leave. And then the sergeant came up. I liked this guy. He came up and tried to talk me into re-enlisting. And he says, you're too hard on yourself. He walked away. I don't know what he was doing. Kind of strange. But it was that strange state of mind where, you realize it's over and you got to leave. And those accusations of being gay and stuff didn't make any sense because I wasn't gay. And
Right.
but I just didn't care. So the hell with them,
Right.
So, so I landed in Fort Lewis, and I could remember the extraordinary, the exhilaration. I felt like I was left, the lid of the box had opened and I was out.
That's a great way to describe that, Andy. I love that description.
Yeah. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, but I mean, I have a little bit different experience because I was in the Navy, and then when I left the Navy, I felt that way, and then I went and joined the National Guard. But when I retired, the same thing. Like, this is kind of freedom that overwhelms you almost.
Yeah. So I could remember when the lid of the box closed, when I got on the bus leaving to go to in the very first days of Fort Campbell, and then that strange sensation of being let out of the box. Mm-hmm. And the next memory was taking a taxi into Seattle, and I felt really unstable because the suspension was so soft. Yeah. And it's like I was rolling on a wave. Because, I've been in Deuce-and-a-Halfs for a year.
Yeah, they're not known for their comfort, right?
Yeah, and then we did so much walking, walking up OPs, up to the OPs, carrying lots of ammo and stuff. So I had been like an 8th century person, mm-hmm. Living in a more, well, it was an Asian environment where you just walked all over the place. So, we were in trucks maybe once every week at the most. So I felt disoriented going up the freeway.
Yeah. It's like, for me, when I came back from overseas, it was the smell of clean air that I hadn't experienced in a year.
Yes.
Yeah. So is Fort Lewis where you ended up like mustering out then? How long were you there?
Oh, geez, I don't think more than one day.
Oh.
And then where did I go? I can't remember where I was. Oh, we went to SeaTac.
Uh-huh.
And, I had my ticket home. So I was dressed in my, summer uniform. And I had my good conduct medal and then my Chosun Reservoir medal, which was just given to you for being there, and I felt proud of that. Then I had my marksmanship badge.
Yeah.
My parents didn't show up at the airport, so and friends or anything else. And I remember this woman staring at me malevolently. She was the only woman in the reception area, and she stared at me like I was evil, And that was a premonition of what was to come. Because the next few days, I was walking around wondering, what's this all about? So I got home, and my parents were kind of blasé. It was strange. My mother gave me a hug, but my father was just kind of blasé about the whole thing. It kind of annoyed me. So, I think what did I do? I worked for my father. We had a fishery, and then I could remember I was having a lot of problems with my dad. And now as I look back on it, I realized that I wanted some kind of recognition, something, some kind of understanding that the war was such a futile thing. And I was a Democrat and he was a Republican.
Yeah, so that probably didn't help things.
Well, I was kind of trapped there trying to figure out what to do with my life. And one day he was driving me to summer camp. I hated going to summer camp because I had a 4-month obligation, 19 months duty, and then 24 months obligation. So I went to summer camp at Camp McCoy in Wisconsin, and I had to take the bus. We had an argument, and he says, you didn't suffer. He says, what are you whining about? You had easy duty, which was true.
Right, but in if you look in retrospect, though, it's still the military. You're still away from home. It's still not necessarily the safest place to be. I mean, that's where I struggle with the hierarchy of service. Right, like everyone served. We just served in different capacities.
Yeah. It was a kind of a, what's that term for, kind of a holding. It was a state of suspension. And now I look back on it, it's funny, I never thought of that. So I was having emotional problems, and I'd stay with my artist friends. My cousin was an artist, and she knew these guys that had kind of an arts colony in Wisconsin. So I'd hang out with them, and I was really kind of wounded. I can't explain it exactly, but they were really, really nice to me. They're softer kind of men, and they hated the war, and that was kind of nice because they helped me heal that kind of disagreement I had with my father.
Right.
I was 20. What was I? 21. I was 21. So I decided to go to school, and I went to the University of Minnesota and got the GI Bill.
Well, that's a really nice deal. I know it's changed quite a bit, but I know the GI Bill paid for my college as well. What did you study?
Well, I was actually thinking very practically, because then I didn't have to work if I could be sly about it. A friend and I came back from the Marines. We rented an apartment, and it was kind of an experiment for young men. It's like, oh my God. And I had a girlfriend, and he didn't. But it was like $150 a month, right?
Yeah.
So I got $150 a month for GI Bill, and then my father paid for my education, which was a nice gesture. Kind of a privileged family. But back then, let's see, the tuition was $500 a year, I think. So that was a good deal. And what happened? So by the time, by the next spring, I was getting kind of stir crazy. I was taking art courses, and I was drumming, and I was training as a drummer. And I got involved in April, in Earth Day at the university, and I started to become interested in protesting the war. So I got involved with the Student Strike Committee, and out of that came the Minnesota Five. Bill Tilton and those guys, they went to jail.
Yeah.
A couple months later for pouring blood on the selective service files. So I was involved with those guys, going around the university in my Ike jacket with a red armband, giving speeches that, although I'd been in the service, I felt it was time to end this thing. And I was kind of torn by that, because my father, again, he hated it. And I ended up on television, and he saw me he says he saw me on WCCO television.
which probably didn't make him very happy.
No, so Dad's pissed off. And I found out that Bill Tilton, who was the head of the Student Strike Committee, was the son of his best friend. So that was strange.
Yeah, it sounds like a little rebellion between the generations there.
Oh, tell me about it. Well, it was about time, you know. And,
Yeah.
I don't know. So I was kind of drifting along there, and I think I only had to do one summer camp at Camp McCoy. And they just said, get out of here. You know, it was so boring. It was, oh God, it was boring. You know, going out to Wisconsin and playing war games. So let's see, that's when I got really seriously involved with dance. And there were bench warrants issued for our arrest because we took over the student union and put 2x4s across the doors. And there was a big event. It was I think it was May 1st. And a very famous supporter of SDS, a wealthy man, Don Dellinger, what was his first name? Anyway, I became his bodyguard because I was a karate guy, and I didn't know anything about being a bodyguard.
Right.
So here I am on a stage with one of the wealthiest supporters of the Democratic Party, looking for people with guns and knives. And there's a crowd of about 100 people, 200, and they're all staring at him. Suddenly there's a ruckus, and they grabbed this guy. I saw the knife, and they grabbed him. The people in the crowd grabbed him, and I didn't do a thing. I was just standing there. But so that was my experience with that. And then Mayor Stenvig came trotting up on horseback, the chief of police, and they were wearing weapons. And I said, they've got live weapons, you guys, so don't do anything. And they had those funny ray guns that would shoot, pepper gas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they were very formidable looking. It was like a platoon of cavalry. And they kind of created kind of a semicircle at the back. Because the big street, 4th Street, runs right through the campus at Kaufman Union. And they crossed over the bridge, and all of this was illegal. They weren't supposed to be on campus with live weapons. But apparently the National Guard was behind it. I thought, oh, God. So what we did is we hightailed it. And the next day, he got out there with a bullhorn and said, we are breaking up this demonstration.
Right.
So we all dispersed. And the next day, I heard that bench warrants had been issued for the 11 people on the Student Strike Committee, which I was part of. And I thought, uh-oh.
So now you're a fugitive.
So now I'm a fugitive. Everybody's dispersed. And Bill Tilton was arrested along with, they called the Minnesota Five. Uh-huh. And then the math building in White Mass, Wisconsin blew up. Somebody put dynamite in it, killed a janitor. And there had been an SDS guy in our group who advocated violence. And I said, no, violence, no good. But all this time I was working with Marv Davidoff, who's kind of a peace hero around here. And he studied with Saul Alinsky.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Davidoff was great. He had been in the Army in World War II, and he said, look, you guys, we're going to go over to Honeywell, the corporate offices, and we're going to sit down in front of the doors, and we're going to hold flowers, and it's a peaceful demonstration. Under no circumstances make eye contact with the police, and just do not resist. If they grab you, just go limp. So we did that. We did that, right? And Monte jumped up, and Monte was an SDS guy who believed in violence, and we were in disagreement. Monte was a pain in the neck, and Monte threw himself at the glass doors, and he was grabbed immediately, and the rest of us just sat there peacefully, singing "We Shall Overcome." So there was a Honeywell project, and Marv Davidoff was really instrumental in getting. He sat down with the CEO and they talked, and and it helped stop the anti-personnel mine thing. So after about a week, I thought, I better get out of here. My dad said, "You better get out of here."
Right.
So I took my savings and I re-enrolled in the Goethe Institute in Germany. I had been there before military, and now I was going to go back.
Right.
So I just hopped on an Icelandic flight, and there I was at the Goethe Institute again. And I thought, this time I'm going to stay. So I stayed about 6 months. Mm-hmm. I worked in hotels, slept on a lot of park benches, and I got really poor because I ran out of money.
Right.
So I met this guy named George Standing, who was an electrician from England, and I had no coat. All I had was a sweater, and it was Christkindlesnacht in Nuremberg. Nuremberg's where my great-great-grandfather came from. Mm-hmm. I found out later. And he was an inventor. I think he was Jewish, but I don't know for sure. Anyway, so I was freezing my ass off, and this Englishman, he said, "I say, old man, you look rather cold. Why don't you take my coat?" And it created a fast friendship with this guy. And I realized I had to come back.
Yeah.
I had to come back. So I had just enough money. I think it was $89 to take a Lufthansa flight, and then I flew back to Minneapolis.
Well, I want to circle back a little bit and talk a bit about the Minnesota. It was the Minnesota 8, right? So you were arrested as part of that Minnesota 8, correct?
No, we were warned.
Okay.
The inner circle, Marv Davidoff, not Marv. Marv was also might have been arrested. I don't know. But the names I forget, but I'll never forget Bill. And within that week, they spilled blood on they broke into the Selective Service office and just trashed it. And I don't know how they caught him, but they got him, and they went to jail. He went to jail for 2 years, I think.
Yeah, I did a little reading on it, and they were actually somebody had tipped off the FBI. That's how they got caught. Someone ratted them out.
Great, I'm learning something every day.
There you go. Yeah. So just kind of for posterity, right? It was Bill Tilton, you, Andrew Glenn, Bob Bly, Timothy O'Brien, Richard Miller, Mike O'Connell, Marv Davidoff, and John Hanson were the eight involved in all of that.
But was my name involved?
Yeah, your name is shown as part of that. Just so you know.
Okay.
Google yourself and you'll see it.
Oh shit! I'm telling you, dude. I don't. There's a connection to this. I was playing tennis. 25 years later, I was about 50. Let's see. I was about 48, and I was in my singing career, and it was really slowing down. And I used to play tennis by myself, or I would go to the tennis courts at the University of Washington because I lived right near there. And I wrote a lot, and it was a lull in my singing career. So I was really enjoying myself. I had no money, and I was whacking a tennis ball against the backboard, and this kind of collegiate dude said, "Do you want to, kick the ball back for us?" So we volleyed and had fun. And he said, "I'll take you to lunch." So we go down to Starbucks and have a sandwich. And I was looking at this guy, And I thought, he's CIA. Just the thought went through my head.
Right.
Because my dad had one of his best friends was the head of he was the CIA director for the Puget Sound area, and I had dated his daughter. And I had this intuition that this guy was connected somehow. And I said, you're a field agent for the CIA, aren't you? And he said, that's exactly why I'm here.
Oh, boy.
He said, we need people like you. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, look, he said, I'm an artist. I've been a rebel. And yeah, but what I'd like to know is, why did you find me? How did you find me? And he said, we have our ways. I have a dossier on you as thick as my thumb. And I said, what for? He said, back in the student strike days, we were all over you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he says, then we followed your career in German, and you speak a little Spanish, and you're just perfect. And then you're in theater, you're just perfect to be an agent. And I said, well, how much do I get? And he said, $80,000 a year. Now, this is 93.
Uh-huh.
He said, I was 45. And he said, but you have to work 5 stories beneath Pittsburgh in a windowless room, interviewing illegal immigrants from Europe and Mexico.
I think I might say no thanks to that.
Yeah, and I said, pal, I'm too far down the line, you know.
There you go. You declined the CIA offer, but let's go back to, you took your $89 flight on a Lufthansa airplane and came back to Minnesota then? Is that what happened?
Yeah, and I stayed with parents through the winter. And remember, a banjo player, a friend of mine, committed suicide, and I felt really bad about that. And he was a brilliant guy. And anyway, I don't know why I'm bringing that up. But anyway, I really wanted to dance. What I learned in Germany, oh my God, it just blew my mind. I was in the Goethe Institute, and they had on television, I saw these dancers talking about this style of life. And, I'm a very athletic person. And I thought, I'd like to try this. And then this really blows my mind. I met 2 people with the same surname, William and Mary Glenn, and they were young actors from Massachusetts. And they said, we have an extra ticket for the Firebird at the Munich Opera House. And that's what did it. I was up there in the Munich Opera House watching, it was that fantastic French dancer. Anyway, I can't remember. He had this red plume and a black cape. It was the London Contemporary Dance Theater. And I said, that's it. That's what I want to do. And it hit me like a brick. So what did I do? I wrote a letter to the London School of Contemporary, to the dance school.
Yeah.
And they said the GI Bill wouldn't work. Or no, and the American government said I couldn't pay for it. And I said, oh shit, then I wanted to stay in Germany, but I realized that if I went back to the States, I could study dance at the Guild of Performing Arts, and I could get paid to go to school. So I went to the Guild of Performing Arts. It was the McAllister College Summer School of Dance. And I was 22, but I looked young. So my good buddy, Bruce Drake, who ran it, he snuck me in illegally. And I got my first dance lesson in modern dance, and I was hooked. It was a religious experience. And from then on, I was, then I went in, I got so full of myself, you know, as a male dancer surrounded by beautiful women, I had no apparent talent. And Nancy Houser said, you act like you're the best in the world. You've got at least 5 years left before you're technically sufficient. And she was right. And I got depressed. I got so depressed, I just took my car and I just drove west and slept in my car. And I thought, I'm going to drop out of civilization and I'm just going to live in the woods. So I linked up with my brother who came back from Vietnam, and he was a science guy. He actually worked in computer systems before anybody knew about it. And we were camping out near Las Vegas and looking up at the stars. And he said the most amazing thing I've ever heard. He said, someday, he said, the whole world will be surrounded by a net and it'll bounce off of the moon and we will be able to communicate with handheld phones like we did when we were kids. We had these walkie-talkie things.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, the whole world will be a net. And I said, whoa. And he said, because I always wanted to understand electricity, and he was brilliant with this stuff. And he said, you will have two choices. You will be on the net or you'll be off the net. There won't be anything in between. He said, the net will create these spaces, and you can drop off the net and drop out of the world. But if you come back, you've got to come all the way back. And I thought, what the hell is he talking about? Well, my brother he jammed the television network. He created a Morse code system. He had my father's Morse code set, and he hitched it up with a crystal radio set.
Mm-hmm.
And he would send Morse code to friends who were watching the news across the television set. And Mr. Donahauer, who was a Navy guy, he called my father and said, he's fucking up the news broadcast at 6 o'clock on WCCO. So with his Morse code. And so my father got a call from the FCC saying, your son is in serious trouble. My brother was 8 years old.
Oh, gosh.
He was so brilliant. Oh, God. So anyway, back to Las Vegas, I thought, what's he talking about? And then I realized I couldn't run away. So I went back to the University of Minnesota. I said, I'm going to get a dance degree. And I went to University of Oregon, and I started really studying hard. Mm-hmm. And then I got into theater. I did Waiting for Godot, the University Theater, as a mime. I took mime training, and I was real successful with theater. They wanted me to do Death of a Salesman and all this stuff. But I wanted to be a dancer. So after a quarter, I decided that I didn't want to live in Oregon and get a dance degree because I was wasting time. I was already 26. So I came back to University of Minnesota, and I joined a dance company. And then I met the first love of my life was Sarah, and she's Jewish. I was really part of the Jewish community in Minneapolis. They're wonderful people because they supported the arts. And she would say, you don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to fight your father. You don't have to rebel. Just be an artist. And this was a great message because I had all this hang-ups about, just hang-ups about being the son of a judge. He was a very influential person. So
Andy, I don't want to interrupt, but there's a point here too that she was really saying is just be yourself, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily the arts. It could have been anything, but the arts is what you were tuned into. And so I think really the message she was giving you was, hey, just be yourself. Like that's all you can be.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I went through certain forms of therapy when I was with her, like reevaluation counseling, all this different stuff. But it was kind of putting men through a meat grinder. She was a feminist and a communist, and I didn't like any of that. So I just felt like as a man, I was being ground up.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, the director said, if you study at a dance camp, I said, I'll consider putting you in the company. So she and I went to San Diego and joined a professional dance camp, which lasted 8 weeks. And then when I came back, she said, you're in the company. So then I was in Molly Lynn's company, and then and then her second company I got into Martha Graham's work with the American Contemporary Dance Theater, Northrop Auditorium. I wasn't in Martha Graham's company, but I was in her choreography. And then I was really hitting it. I was really getting it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all these years of training. And this is what it's like, you train. Finally, you're doing it. And then I got into Molly's new company, and that was kind of prestigious. We performed at a lot of colleges, modern dance, traditional modern dance. And then we had a big falling out, and I left and said, to hell with it. I'm going back. I'm going to Seattle, and my back was going out. So I took Skinner Releasing as a therapeutic movement system out in Seattle. And Seattle completely changed my life because the winters were nice and warm, and my love life was fantastic.
So before we get too far into that, so you and Sarah at this point have broken up. Then you're not together.
Yeah, we finally broke up.
And how long were you together?
About 2 years.
Okay. So now you're out. Go ahead.
Yeah, my brother committed suicide when I was in the company, and that was a knockout punch. And it's like Gurdjieff talks about the shocks that human beings need to wake up, and I really was starting to wake up. And of course, suicide is you can't fight it. It's just it happens. And so I decided I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
So I moved to Seattle, but I moved to Seattle with a new girlfriend. So she wasn't a dancer.
Mm-hmm.
And we rented this beautiful house on Lake Union surrounded by beautiful flowers. It was so romantic, and the seaplanes taking off in the morning. You could look down at the seaplanes as they're lifting off, And that relationship went to hell very quickly because I started to work as a massage therapist, and she got jealous and felt I was cheating on her, which wasn't true. Mm-hmm. So she was actually cheating on me. And so I ended up single in Seattle, starting a new career.
That's awesome.
Yeah, just a great place. It was. Then I met Kenny Mandel, who is. He was the nephew of Johnny Mandel, and I think Johnny Mandel, but Lou Ayres, who was Perry Como's artistic director at Columbia Artists, and he stayed with me for 8 years. He played shakuhachi flute, and we choreographed, and I started a company, and I became a pantomime. I went around, I toured the Western states mostly in colleges, giving mime performances. And I produced about 8 shows of my own. So I had a board of directors, and I had, I had an agent, Jeff Bidwell. I had these people really helping me. I was attracting all these people.
Yeah.
As a soloist, completely different from being in a modern dance company, where you're an actor in a troupe. But this was different, and I became more like Marcel Marceau, white face on a stage, dancing around.
Uh-huh.
But in the meantime, I was studying voice, and Perry Como was my hero, and I started to sing. And after 8 years, I decided I wasn't going to pantomime anymore, and I was going to sing. And I tried out retirement communities and worked out. And I developed a crooning program similar to Frank Sinatra or Perry Como.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Andy, this is going to sound silly, but when you mentioned Marcel Marceau, it reminded me of Mel Brooks's silent movie, where remember the whole movie is silent, but they ask Marcel Marceau if he wants to participate. He's the only one that speaks. He says no.
Yeah, I saw that clip. I never saw the movie, but Mel Brooks is my favorite.
He's just amazing. I didn't mean to sidetrack us, but when you said Marcel Marceau, that's immediately what came to my mind. He's this famous, pantomime or mime, and he's the only speaking part in that whole movie. I thought it was great irony.
Well, the joke is, have you ever heard Marcel Marceau's best-selling record?
I think this is a joke that only a few are going to get, but I love it.
Yeah. Well, Marcel Marceau, when I studied with a fellow by the name of, I forgot his name. How can I forget his name? Anyway, he was really big on Broadway, and Marcel Marceau asked him to join his troupe. And we were all living in the same house, Sarah and myself. And I said, Ms. Mike Hennessy, I said, Mike, wow, congratulations. The great Marcel Marceau wants you in his troupe. He said, I turned him down. Jesus Christ. What an idiot.
Yeah.
He made it on Broadway with great reviews as a kind of a Marcel Marceau, and then he quit. Nobody heard from him since. I don't know what happened.
Kind of like a Cat Stevens almost.
Like Cat Stevens?
Yeah.
Well, we had parties in that house that the cops would come 3 times a night. It was just insane. We had I had a flamenco dancer with long red hair and her boyfriend, Greg Wolf. You know how much noise that makes.
Yeah.
And then Dimitri the Clown doing acrobatics in the living room. But Dimitri the Clown was an internationally famous clown. Then Mike Hennessy, and myself were all singing, and the cops came 3 times one night. I mean, we almost blew that house off the planet.
Oh my! So Andy, how old were you when you started singing then?
Well, I sang in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I had a good voice. I sang in Glee Club when I was 15 and 14, but we sang classical Glee Club. We sang, Copeland, American Favorites.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't think anything of it because I came from a family of singers. My uncle was an opera singer, and everybody sang. My father sang. We didn't have a radio in the car, and he'd sing all the way across Colorado,
Yeah.
And I never thought about singing as a career. And I knew I had a fairly good voice. I didn't have an ego about it. And then it hit me, it just kept creeping up on me when I was doing all this silent dancing. So why can't I be like, what's his name? The famous singer dancer, Gene Kelly. Why can't I be like Gene Kelly? He sang too. So I started to sing, and the guy said, you've got a strong Italian tenor voice if you develop it, but it's going to take you 7 years. It always takes 7 years.
It's never overnight, is it?
Oh shit! It took 7 years, I'll tell you, because so while I was doing the mime work, I would go to this famous opera woman, and she'd say, "God, you suck," and it was like this went on for years until I finally could put it all together and sing properly. It was called a correct voice, and so I moved in. This is the Sandy Deary story. I moved in with this playwright, and Sandy was she wrote scripts for MASH. She's a brilliant woman, and she was the voice of NPR, and she had a job at her business bureau, and I didn't have a job. And I said, I want you to be my agent. And I had Columbia artists coming to my door. I was 40 years old, and they said, we're going to set you up with all these symphonies, and you're going to be the funny guy in front of the symphony before they do, Beethoven's Ninth. So, but she didn't want to do it. And then the Columbia artist guy disappeared. Poof. And I called Columbia artists and I said, do you have an agent named Joe Blow? And they said, no.
Oh, huh.
Jesus Christ. So here I am, 40 years old. I've been producing my own little shows. And I'm living with this 25-year-old genius. She looked like Deborah Winger. So she's a beautiful woman. And she was a poet and a novelist and a playwright. And you get two artists living together. They're so absorbed in their material. It's very hard to live with each other.
Right.
So after about a year of that, I said, guess what? I'm going to become an opera singer, and I'm going to go back to Philadelphia, this is where she came from. So it just broke my heart. I said, well, look, come with me. We were fighting all the time. I said, move back to Philly and we'll live together. She didn't want to do that. So I really liked Philadelphia. It was the opposite of Seattle. Seattle was ethereal and spiritual and healing and gentle. And Philadelphia was brutal. East Coast, brutal. But I liked that. And when I got into the singing business, holy smokes, did I learn what real singing is. Yeah. Auditioning for the Philadelphia Opera Company. So I got into the Rutgers Opera Company, and I was an understudy. I was an Italian tenor, and we sang Donizetti, Joe Green, Verdi. We sang Verdi, and here I was, 46 years old, and being used by a college opera company. But my director was this genius, and Carnegie Hall Opera Orchestra, Martin Dillon. We became good friends, and this led to some really interesting escapades. Yeah, that was Martin Dillon, and well, what I did was, actually, it was fairly drastic. I probably should have studied tenor work in Seattle, but I wanted to leave Seattle. So I kind of made it hard on myself by moving across the country to an apartment that actually my girlfriend had set up for me. That was really nice. And I thought she might want to come and, move back to Philly, but she didn't. So there I was, and like the first 3 days in Philadelphia, I parked my car. Oh, that dog's! I'm down in the basement here. Anyway, yeah, it sounds like a wind blowing through the trees.
Oh, geez.
So I suppose I shouldn't mention anything besides this narrative. So I parked my car under a bridge and I went to a Puerto Rican celebration, and I got back and my car was gone. So that was my introduction to Philadelphia.
Well, and I find it interesting when we were talking, about your move, that one of the reasons you wanted to move to Philly was because it was hard and where you were at seemed kind of soft and spiritual, and you were kind of seeking a harder life almost, is what it sounded like to me.
God, you're really good, I guess. Well, I was looking for more of a challenge, and I knew the East Coast was a much better place to pursue classical music, because Seattle was, it had its own classical community, but it was pretty small. There was only one opera company, you know, and so it was really about opportunity. And I think I was right, because after a few years of work, Martin took me up to Juilliard, and I got a free recording session at the Juilliard Sound Studios.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
Small miracle. Yeah, he was a tenor with the Carnegie Hall Opera Orchestra, and was very, very prominent. So,
wow, that's yeah. I mean, that's no small feat to be able to do something like that. So, what all did you record then as a part of that?
Let's see. The recordings I did 3 recordings. Bonancini, Per la Gloria d'Adoravi, which is a Baroque opera, a Baroque aria, and the song is You, which is a famous show tune. And the third one was Black is the Color of My True Love's Hair.
Oh, okay.
Pretty sure. And those are on that CD that you have.
All right. And I think maybe we'll share some excerpts of that as part of your recording, if that's all right.
Oh, hey, yeah. Okay. That's what I like.
Awesome. So good.
I'm going to go to the other side of the house to get away from this, this animal. This drama. The drama of the dog.
Right.
And that angry redheaded single mom who thinks I don't understand her problems. Yeah, maybe it's quieter up here. Always go in the bathroom. It's quieter. Yeah, this is better. So, yeah.
All right. So you, so it sounds like things are going really well in Philly with all that's going on. How long did you stay there, and what are some of the other things that you accomplished while you were there?
Well, when I got to Philly, I had to make money, so I found an agent to be a pantomime and children's little birthday parties, and then I did some clubs. It was very weird work because it's commercial work, and I'd been primarily doing concert work in Seattle. So I didn't start concert mime work in Philadelphia. I taught at a private school. I did a few workshops, and then I had this agent for children's, for birthday parties, kind of like a clown at a birthday party. It's not work that I particularly liked, but, and then let's see, what else did I do? Yeah, I did that, and worked as a massage therapist.
Okay. Now, did you stay out east for quite a while then?
Yeah, I stayed there. This is really amazing stuff because I was basically not making ends meet, and I was sitting in a little coffee house at 411 12th Street. Anyway, it's right near University of Pennsylvania. And it was the coffee house was up for sale, and there's nobody in it. And this fellow strode in with this beautiful girlfriend, and he was kind of a Russian-looking character. And he was sitting across the room, and we got to know each other. And he said, "What do you do?" And I told him what I was doing, and then I was a writer, and he said, "Do you want to work for me? I make films."
Oh,
Here, here I was thinking, what am I going to do now?
right.
His name was Chris Zeloff, and his grandfather had was the man who manufactured Sputniks.
Uh-huh.
These things they put up in outer space in the 60s. He was a Russian. He had a factory north of Philadelphia. And anyway, that's a segue. So this rather strange man who was very kind of flamboyant in a long black cape. He says, "I'm making a film where I need an assistant to carry my cameras and to do research for me." And I thought, oh, great, And he said, "Money's not a problem." I like that.
Yeah.
And then he says, we'll get together. And I said, "What's the film?" And he says, "It's called Design Outlaws on the Ecological Frontier." And what that entailed was interviewing 10 scientists who had invented machines to purify the environment and to make man more adaptable to the environment and to preserve the environment. It was in 1988. This was the fall of 88 when I left. And so he'd send me to the libraries looking to research these physicists and so forth. And then he would go out and he was on public television quite a bit. He was kind of like Bill Moyers, and he was a very good speaker. And the people that were supporting the film was the Buckminster Fuller Society. And, the Diamaxian map and all these things. So his funding, and he had wealth from his grandfather. So then he turns around and he says, "I want to take that coffee house and I want to rent the coffee house and start a business, and you'll be the co-director." So we turned the coffee house into Cairo's Coffee House, which had a philosophy of bringing in the University of Pennsylvania and bringing in West Philly, the Black population, and getting an integration going culturally between the various people that made up West Philadelphia. And we do this through culture, through poetry readings and through song recitals. So I became the artistic director, and I remember bringing in a woman who was a cantoress, a Jewish cantoress, and she'd sing, and we had this front window with a stage, and she would sing. And then I'd bring in classical violinists, and then I'd get up and sing. And then we had a new thing called computers in the basement.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I didn't like the idea of computers. So Chris and I would fight over that.
So what was the purpose of the computers in the basement?
Well, he wanted to, Chris's whole philosophy, like Buckminster Fuller, was to show how technology and how scientific thought is part of nature and part of culture and part of art. And I never liked Buckminster Fuller particularly. He created the geodesic dome and was a tremendous teacher. Uh-huh. I saw him teach when I was very young. Solid geometry and icosahedronic structures, and he patented the Diamaxian car and all of these different things to show that then an automobile can have 3 wheels and be a commercial success. All this stuff. The Diamaxian car, yeah, that was a trip.
Yeah.
But I think Buckminster Fuller was really one of the most exciting thinkers of the 20th century, because everything that's followed, it was like he broke the ground for all of this new technology. Now that I think about it.
Well, it's I find it interesting, Andy. It seems almost like a dichotomy, right? Like you have this amount of respect for what he does, but you don't really care for it.
Yeah, I learned a lot, and I was kind of a B student in geometry, and I really enjoyed solid geometry. But like with Chris, I was trying to tell him that an artist doesn't function on that level. Is not a scientist,
right?
So, but what the heck? But we were great friends, and we had a jolly time. And so he said, "We're going to Paris." It was November of '89. Coffeehouse was working pretty well, and hey, the New York Times wanted to write an article about it, because this was the only coffee house that was open to the public. As you know, like Starbucks, you had in the 70s, you had the Allegro Cafe and Starbucks Cafe in Seattle, which were very unusual. There was only one Starbucks store in 1980. And I used to hang out at the Allegro, and I said, someday I'd like to have a coffee house, because, you had 20 tables, and you had artists, mostly artist types, but people, from all backgrounds, sitting around, just like they did in England in the 19th century. So when I ended up in Philadelphia, it was like a dream come true. I love coffee houses. So what's the point of all this? So Chris had a philosophy of Gemütlichkeit, of what was the term he used? Convivial. And this was part of the whole intellectual movement of recreating a convivial society by creating new physical spaces, physical sites, like museums that would have coffee houses or hot tubs, It's all very creative. And the convivial society was part of the philosophy of these scientists that we were interviewing. Like Stuart Brand's The Living House, which was a house that processes its own sewage. It heats itself with its own energy. It's an extraordinary thing. And so here we're dealing with these experimental thinkers and getting them on film and filming them in their houses, sitting in a chair. So you had all these famous people in, how do you say, environmental science, and who are also physicists. And so I carried the camera. So once the coffee house got off the ground, he said, we're going to Paris, and we're going to interview so-and-so. So I'd carry the cameras. They were pretty big in those days. So like I would go through a turnstile in Paris, and I'd throw the camera to him on the other side, and then I'd go under the turnstile. This is an old trick,
Yeah.
But so we rented we were in this hotel room, and Chris opened this newspaper, and it said, "The wall is down," in French. It was the day the wall came down between East and West Germany.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was like, wow. So I ended up, after that gig, I ended up having no money, and Chris flew back to Philadelphia. And I was sleeping under the myrtle bushes on Lindseygrad in a sleeping bag to save money. I had some money. But then the plane ticket he gave me didn't work. So I had to live in the airport for 4 days waiting for the ticket to be reissued. Well, this led to some interesting things. I started to juggle for the people in the airport. And I found a way to get out of the airport through a side door. I would sleep on the soccer field at night. And then I had propped the door open just a little bit for the latch so I could come back through the side door into the airport.
These are things you could not do today.
You can't do this stuff.
No.
So then I found out later that the village that I was sleeping in was where my ancestors came from. Not Chatwick. What was the name of that town? So anyway, that's a side issue.
So that's interesting, though, that you ended up there, but you didn't know at the time when you were making this plan that it was your ancestral home, basically.
Yeah, it was Gatwick. I have a ancestor who was the sister of George Washington's wife, and they came from Gatwick.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Trippy world.
Right. So how long did you stay there, like sort of kind of living in the airport and kind of bouncing around, it sounds like?
Well, it's getting on my nerves, and I was reading a lot and writing, and then one day I was juggling, and these people were very amused, and there was this Nigerian prince or someplace, and he had these beautiful robes with a conical hat. He was obese, and he was laughing, and he said, "Why are you juggle in the airport?" And I said, "Well, I'm waiting for my ticket, and I don't have any money. I don't have any food, you know." And he opened his wallet, and he gave me $100.
Really?
Yeah, just like that.
So I find it interesting, though, because today when you mention the term Nigerian prince, they're usually trying to extract money from you.
Yeah. No, this guy was very, he had that jovial look of plenitude.
Uh-huh.
And his kids like me, So then the ticket came, and I flew back, and then I was really mad at Chris because the ticket was no good. And the coffee house went very well for a year, and we had people lined up, like 10 or 20 people all day coming to our takeout window. Uh-huh. And we created a takeout window. That was a natural thing to do. And so we sold most of the coffee through the windows. But it was the article in the Philadelphia Inquirer that really made a difference. We became too popular. We only had 11 little Italian tables. And we had a 1918 steam espresso machine that was gold and silver. It cost like $20.
Wow, not today. It wouldn't.
No. So what we had to do in the very beginning was take out this. This building was built like 1740. Mm-hmm. We had to really kind of gut it out. And I had worked in the building trades in Seattle, and we hired a guy named Tom Shakespeare, who turned out to be a violent drunk, but he ended up working for Garrison Keillor, in his show.
Yeah.
But Tom was a real character, so he directed, the operation, which was, we had a young African American guy who I hired to be the assistant manager because he was dashing and handsome and young, and he could attract the young students. Mm-hmm. Right. And his father was a poet. Well, we built this whole thing, and then we had a sculpture that was made by a guy who's now a prominent painter in Paris named Wilhelm Thompson. And it ends up that Chip, the assistant manager, stole kited checks from the company checkbook.
Oh, no.
So Chris, at the very beginning, he said, don't hire black people. I said, Chris, that's not right, because you're living in a black community. And he says, they steal. And I said, look, I couldn't deal with that. So I hired black people. He didn't like that.
Well, I think in all honesty, right, you could hire anybody and anybody could steal from you.
Exactly.
I mean, that's how life works. I mean, just because in this particular instance, someone who was of color stole from you does not mean that everyone of color is going to steal from you.
Yeah. So Chris had to work on that little thing in his head.
Yeah.
As a friend of mine said, John, who sold books, had a book stand, black guy, I said, well, what's all this racism the white people have? He said, man, you got to work on your own shit.
Right.
And that's what, it's your own shit. So.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So how old are you now? You're in Philly. You got this coffee house, seems to be pretty successful. And you got to be getting, mid 40s now?
No, I'm 40 in 88.
Oh, in 88. Okay, we're in 88. Got you.
So the coffee house, the really cool thing is I didn't know what I was doing. It's like one of these second lieutenants goes to the sergeant and said, what do I do?
Right.
He said, you're the manager of the cafe and you're half owner. And so I borrowed $5,000 and then he paid the other $10,000. And so he had say in it, and I said, well, I don't want to have anything to do with run the daily operation. So I interviewed these people and I found this a woman who had a coffee house in Greece. And I said, you're hired, bang. And she did a beautiful job. She handled everything. And it's like the same model for coffee houses today where you have suites you can buy and a takeout. There was nothing in Philadelphia. There wasn't anything in Camden, New Jersey. There were no coffee houses. It was just absolutely zero. You had delis, East Coast, Jewish deli, but there's always only two tables. And young people don't, what Chris was talking about is really an American revolutionary custom, which is, the young people dream up shit and they do it in special places.
Right.
It could be Ben Franklin and English coffee houses, and so Chris had this idea of revolution and change, which I think was right on. He was really right about this. And he had the power of being a producer of documentary films. It's a real powerful thing.
Right.
So the film we made was called Design Outlaws on the Ecological Frontier. And Brian Dennis was the co-producer, and it won 17 educational awards around the world. But it still didn't make much money, which puzzles me. It's an hour long. You can still get it. You could order it.
Well, I think sometimes that's the way it works. So something that's critically successful, right, turns out not to be so financially successful.
Sure. Yeah. I'm in a film right now that it's an art film, and who knows?
Right. Could be big, could be great, could be all of those things. So you were really kind of on the cutting edge of the whole coffee house revolution, right? Because if you think about it now, to quote an old phrase, you couldn't swing a dead cat on a street corner without hitting a coffee shop.
Yeah, and they're so kind of uniform. But what I really appreciate about Starbucks is they created a place for people in a community to go and in an open exchange of ideas. Like Starbucks had this wonderful shop in Stillwater. And Stillwater, Minnesota is full of artists. And my cousin Jane was a successful artist. She just died last year. But I used to sit in there during French club, and and the guy next to me was the former police chief of Tehran.
Wow.
It was like all the foreigners. Here they are in rural Minnesota, and they have a place to talk to, talk about things. And there was Jessica Lang and Sam Shepard. They'd come in there and they'd sit there. And I knew Jessica. She was a friend of my cousin Jane. They were good friends. So Stillwater's a small town. It's kind of like an art colony.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it too, like in the Middle East and in Europe, I mean, gathering for coffee is a thing. I know in Greece, you could sit for hours and drink frappe and just talk, and no one bothers you.
Yeah, I do that here at Dunn Brothers. They have that type of setup. It's a circle of old friends for 20 years ago. We still meet.
Yeah.
But the franchise now is like $500,000. If you want to open a coffee house like Dunn Brothers, it costs a fortune.
Yeah, and there's no $20 espresso machines either. That's for sure. So,
yeah, we put out about $2,000 to get the thing running. We went down to this warehouse and got these old Italian wire chairs, and the ceramic wire tables with the curled feet. It was a lot of fun doing that.
Oh, I'll bet. And so how long did you do this? So I want to kind of put it in order for me. So you guys opened up the coffee house, and then you went to Paris for a while, and then you came back and ran the coffee house still. Is my timeline right?
Yeah, for about a year, I accompanied him in his various ventures. Once to Paris, and then, but mosely we stayed in the Delaware Valley. Chris lived up in Doylestown. Sorry.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if you know the Delaware Valley, but
I am not familiar with it at all. But
yeah, that Buck County is extremely wealthy. A lot of artists, just old money, Philadelphia.
Yeah. So so then how long then after that did you operated for a year after that, or?
No, after a year of the coffee house, and I stayed with the coffee house and made decisions while he was gone. So after about 2 years, we decided to break up because the film was over.
Okay.
And I moved up to Easton. I did some recording up in Easton. Let's see, I was those first recordings. But the most important thing was studying Italian voice and German lieder with Rose Geringer, who was she was my first voice. I studied 4 years with her, and she was a soprano with the Swiss Opera Roman, and she was a world class. She was an understudy to Callas. So I had the very finest teachers. And then I went from her to I wanted a male tenor teacher. And so I went to Martin Dillon across the river at Rutgers.
Okay.
And I would take off and I'd go around the country in my van because they wouldn't pay me. And I was getting probably $300-400 a show singing in mostly retirement centers around the country. So I would drive to Minneapolis and I'd sing all summer. I'd drive back and I'd sing with the opera. And then he wanted me to sing the lead, a Mozart lead called Domineo. the opera Domineo by Mozart, and he wanted me to sing Idamantes, and I was on the road, so he gave Idamantes to the next tenor, which I, of course, felt cheated, but I wasn't around, so.
Right.
But I was getting money for singing, and then I got offers from, let's see, Pittsburgh Opera, and I got a lot of offers, but they wouldn't pay, and I refused to sing without being paid, which could be my downfall. But
well, right, but I mean, you do need to make a living.
Yeah, God, it was very tight.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So, how long did you do this kind of back and forth from the East Coast to Minneapolis and so on? Did you finally settle down then at some point?
Well, I had an apartment in Philadelphia, and I was having I had a girlfriend there, so I was really part of Philadelphia. But then the summers I would take off for Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
I had booked myself in Seattle, so in between I'd stay with my parents, and it was really hard on my personal life because, I was moving around so much. So I did that for then. Oh my God! Then came Cafe 90. Oh my God! I joined the Poetry Cafe 90,
Mm-hmm.
which I never knew this kind of thing existed, and it was all the poets in Philadelphia raving and screaming.
The one giant poetry slam kind of thing?
Yeah, it was a little more civilized.
Uh-huh.
But that's when I got my first book published at Temple University. They published The Road to Epidaurus, which was 100 poems. And I was making some, I was really becoming acknowledged. And then the Iraq War started, and then I joined with Vietnam-era veterans against the war, and we spoke in churches. And there were a lot of these old progressives, hanging around. So I'd recite poetry, my not anti-war, but my war poetry.
Uh-huh.
So then I pissed off the leader of Cafe 90, who was a politician, and he was running for the Philadelphia School Board or something. And I was staying in his house, and I drank some of his whiskey that was given to him by Che Guevara or somebody like that.
Uh-huh.
And he got really pissed.
Well, that's very interesting. So this was just whiskey that no one drank? Is that how that worked?
Yeah, I never opened it. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So Lauren, the professor that got me published through Temple, he said, "You better leave town. He's really pissed off." I said, "I'm not going to leave town because he's pissed off." But I did move back to Seattle, and I started singing there, and I had some hard times financially. So I'd spend a year in Seattle, and then I'd go back to Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. So this is a lot of back and forth then for you.
Oh God!
And were you basically driving between?
Yeah, I had this blue Ford van, with the doors in the back.
Uh-huh.
And it had bad tires. It was a 3-in-a-tree with a doghouse and a cracked windshield. And the owner said Frank Zappa owned it. I thought that was just bullshit, but the inside had this purple carpet. It was real thick and hand carved. I don't know what it was, but I pulled up the carpet one day, and there were psilocybin mushrooms growing through the rust.
Oh, well, very well could have been owned by Frank Zappa then.
Yeah. The guy told me, he said he almost cried when he sold it to me. So I drove that thing 4 or 5 times across the country. It had about 100,000 on it. It was just a 3-banger, and but I'd pull into gas stations. And look, some guy would say, "Yeah, you're never going to get over the Poconos with that thing."
Clearly, you did.
But I did. I drove it over the Rockies, and I always went like 55 miles an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, and I could sleep in the back. I had a little sofa.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty sexy little operation.
So you did this kind of throughout the early 2000s then?
Yeah, I had 3 vans.
Mm-hmm.
So I would tour in the summers. And then once I toured in the winter through Massachusetts. It was pure hell. 5 feet of snow. But I was desperate for cash and I like to sing. So I had a philosophy of a certain time of year getting set up, doing like 5 shows, 5 gigs in a row to cut down on the cost of the rent from motels.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, I did. Once in North Carolina, I did 5 recitals in 1 week. And they had a hot tub in one of these places. And they put me up. They put me up sometimes. Really nice old retirement communities.
Mm-hmm.
Genteel people with stages and,
So you were kind of doing the whole retirement home circuit then.
That's right.
Okay. Now I have a question about that because we talked about this a couple of times. Is that a thing where there's like a certain group of people who do that? You know what I'm trying to ask? Like, some people do nightclubs, some people do concert halls, but is there like a certain group of people who actually do this on a regular basis?
Yes. There's a website on Dave Rook you can look up. There's hundreds and hundreds of them because, back in my day, in the 90s, the corporations didn't own these places.
Uh-huh.
So around 2000, they started tearing them up and building these things. They all look the same. They look like Lifetime Fitnesses.
Right.
With peaked roofs and the fake pillars and but back in 1988, 1992, there were these beautiful old buildings,
Mm-hmm.
Masonic architecture, Elizabethan architecture, and they were very mellow and they were very courteous, and they'd bring you a check in an envelope, and they paid twice as much, 3 times as much. I got $250 in North Carolina in 1993. That's worth almost $1,000 now. So,
Right.
Yeah, because these were private endowments. And you get some really classy, well-dressed people. And so it's the rage. Everybody's got a guitar. I can't even get a gig in Minneapolis. It's just hopeless.
Because everybody's out there doing the same thing then, huh?
Yeah, the phones are tied up. The activities directors are underpaid. And now I get the same amount of money that I did in 1991.
Wow.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So you carried on through this so when did you have you like finally then settled down in Minneapolis then? When did you like stop traveling?
I really hit the wall. I went to Germany and I came back and I had auditioned for the Bremen Opera Company, and I had a Polish girlfriend in Bremen, and that didn't work out. And the guy turned out to be a crook. The director of the Bremen, he had stiffed my teacher, and I came back pretty disappointed. And that was 99.
Uh-huh.
And I basically had a nervous breakdown. I was driving through, it was summer, and I was driving through Georgia, and I didn't have any money, and I knew I had to do something, and I didn't have enough money to get an apartment, and I just froze up, and I thought I was having a stroke. So I went into a grocery store. I just started to weep, and there was a woman there who was a nurse. And she said, "Come on, honey, we're going to take you to the hospital."
Probably a good thing, too.
Yeah, my right ankle was swelled up, and I had muscular strep in my legs. And she, they gave me a bunch of ibuprofen, and the doctor said, "You're all over the place, man, mentally." Mm-hmm. He said, "You gotta chill, man." So the nurse said, "Honey, y'all got to go home." So I did.
You took her advice.
Yep, and I went to live with my parents. I was 52. And then I kind of recovered in it. Then I got a gig in singing in Philadelphia for the cultural ambassador to the UN from Germany. Wow, what a feather in the hat. So I went back to Philly, and it was a real experience. But like all of these things where you get into the upper echelons, it's pretty ordinary. Mm-hmm. It's not as hard as singing in a retirement community. Because the audiences are, they feed you energy and they smile.
Right. Do you feel that maybe like spending all that time in the retirement homes then kind of contributed to how you were feeling?
No. Yes, because I had the ambition to really sing classical music.
Right.
And it's so difficult to get and I made the wrong moves. The real move is to stay with your church in your hometown and stay in a community for 25 years. And if you've got what it takes, they'll find you. But what I was doing was running all over the place, which I like to do. But
yeah, it's at some point that I have to imagine that just gets old. Clearly.
Yeah, it is. It's old right now because I could sing in an independent living facility, but like last year I did 4 shows for Alzheimer's people, and it was terrible. It was so difficult. Not to sing, you deliver the goods, but the audiences are so whacked out.
Right.
It's, and it's. Oof.
Yeah. So what are you doing? What are you doing now? You are, forgive me, how old now?
78 next week.
Okay. Which in my experience is still pretty young, at least for all the people that I know that are, reaching into their late 70s, early 80s. So what's the plan now?
Well, that's a tough one. I'm telling my life story over the phone. That's right. One thing I'm doing, but always writing and trying to get published. And I got into Veterans Voices. But for the future, my tap dancing is going really well, and the film went well, and there's some prospects of another film being made by Nick. And I wish I had an agent. What I'm really looking for is I was thinking of a speakers bureau and getting on a stage and talking, mm-hmm. kind of like what I'm doing with you,
right?
And making some money and having an audience that is really interacting.
Yeah, I feel like it. I feel like for you, based on what we've talked about, it's important to have that like audience feedback or audience interaction.
Yes. Well, each situation is different. Like doing the film is a very kind of a bell jar situation where you're alone taking direction and there's no audience.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I was singing a nice Polonaise, these people are screaming every time you open your mouth. You know? But there's a happy medium. You know, I remember a picture of Frank Sinatra sitting on a stage singing for Japanese audience of Japanese women, mostly women, and they're all holding flowers. And that's like the ideal thing because they're just absorbing this romantic style of singing and smiling, you know. And it's children's audiences are great.
Yeah,
They're just constantly when my mime work, they're just constantly wiggling around and the energy is just moving back and forth. You're feeding them and they're feeding you. As you get in a retirement center, and the amazing thing about retirement communities, if let's say 7 out of 10 people are pretty sharp, is that this is their music and it's very emotional to them. But up in Minnesota, they don't show it. But they're always women, mostly women. Down south, the women want to get up and dance with you while you're singing.
right. Because you're causing them to remember.
Oh yeah, it's powerful. You know, I had a 99-year-old woman. She was a black woman. She got up, covered with jewels, and she said, "Honey, let's do a little two-step." And so I kept singing over her shoulder while she danced with me.
Oh,
you know,
my
and it was
gosh.
like four of these elderly women got up, and we're all just moving around the stage. It was really great. But I got that down south, but not in Michigan, not in Minnesota, never in Montana.
A little more stoic, right?
We just don't show things the way. I don't know what that's about. We're more stoic, yeah. People like you and I, you know, if I get mad, nobody can. Well, I project a lot, so if I get mad at somebody, it scares them. But you know.
Yeah, I think it's the German Nordic kind of way, right? I don't know, maybe that's it. So, I mean, so going forward, you know, it doesn't sound like it sounds like you're planning on doing some different things, but not necessarily slowing things down very much.
Yeah, I don't feel slowed down. I work out every day, and I tap dance a couple times a week, and that's hard work. And I'm always writing. So what puzzles me is, well, I have one alternative, which is to sing in churches, and I don't like singing in churches particularly. But I would be paid, and my Ave Maria is considered very good, and I could probably sing in a cathedral as a soloist. But those are very hard. Jobs are very hard to get. And I could produce my own leader performances, or I could put on performances of Stephen Foster and German leader from the mid-19th century. But that's a very special audience, and I would have to put it on in a university, place, or maybe library. And the retirement centers are captive audiences. I don't have to do any promo.
Right. You're going to show up and they're going to be there.
Right. And sometimes it's a table of 5 people off to the left, and they're talking to each other. And then there's 3 people in wheelchairs who are completely daffy, and they're spinning in front of you, enjoying themselves. You know, they got dementia, but
never a dull moment, right?
So there's if I get a gig tomorrow, I have to be on my toes because every audience is different.
Right. Well, that makes sense. So, we've talked about a lot of things over the last almost 4 hours of kind of recording your life history. And, I think as we kind of talked about the future and we're sort of winding down our conversation, I do have a question that I would like to ask. I ask everyone the same question, and I think it's very important for people listening to this in the future. So, Andy, if someone's listening to these recordings, say 100 years from now, neither one of us are here, but they're listening to this, what message would you like to leave with people? What would you like them to take away from our conversation?
Oh. In regards to military service, or
just your life philosophy in general. It doesn't have to be about the military. It could be, what message you'd like people to take away from really kind of the way you've lived your life and the things that you've done.
Well, live by the seat of your pants, and take risks that are far beyond common sense, because almost all of the unhappiness in the world, well, for healthy people or people that want to really dig into life, is that they don't shoot high enough.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 19, I was kind of bogged down in doing factory work and wondering where am I going to go? I was writing all this poetry, and I thought I wanted to shoot high. I want to go to a foreign country and learn their language. And that was Germany. And I basically got low grades at the Goethe Institute, but I shot high.
Right.
It's risk. Risk is very, very important.
Well, and I think someone once said, "What aim for the stars, you'll still hit the moon," right?
Yeah, or you just fall flat on your face. I think fall flat on your face. That's the best advice you can give people. I'm terrified of stand-up comedy. I've done stand-up comedy. I'm still terrified of it. And I did, I used to get a lot of laughs in pantomime, and then I found a way to put stand-up comedy in the retirement communities in the middle of my singing, kind of like Dean Martin.
Yeah.
But these are one-liners, really fast. Catskill Jewish comedian, fast one-liners. So I found a place, but to be billed as a comedian or to to be known as a comedian was too confining, mm-hmm. or too scary, or.
I feel like you've kind of lived out a lot of the things that you set out to do, and lived out a lot of things that you didn't set out to do, but turned out to be all the right things for you. And I appreciate you taking all of this time to share all of this with me and the other folks that will be listening to it. And I look forward to talking with you off the record and seeing how you're doing in the future. That's a wrap for this episode of the Veterans Archives podcast. We truly appreciate you taking the time to listen and honor the incredible stories of our nation's heroes. Don't forget, you can catch us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wreaths Across America Radio, or stream past episodes anytime on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and as I've said before, any place you can find a podcast, you can find the Veterans Archives podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share our content on YouTube and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and across all social media. Every share helps us reach more people and preserve more stories. The Veterans Archives podcast is a nonprofit initiative, and our mission is simple: to give veterans a voice and ensure their stories are never forgotten. This service is completely free for veterans because their sacrifices deserve to be recognized and remembered. You want to help? Follow us, spread the word, and if you know a veteran with a story to tell, send them our way. Visit us at veteransarchives.org to learn more about how you can get involved. Thanks again for tuning in, and most importantly, thank you to all the veterans and their families for their service and sacrifice. Until next time, take care, and we will see you on the next episode of the Veterans Archives Podcast.